The scene opens in Lunary, a prosperous land bathed in the light of the goddess, where all kinds of races live in harmony, led by their king to maintain balance. However, there was a young king who seeks to rise above all others. He was a tyrant, a powerful, and seemingly unbeatable ruler. A large crowd is gathered and a lady stands before them, urging them to set aside their differences and unite for the first time in history. Their sole purpose was to defeat the demon king. The lady, having gained power from the goddess Stella, has vowed to save them all. An elf maiden, filled with fear of death, was reassured by a male elf who promises to protect her. A young boy observes the immense number of armies and adventurers gathered, declaring that there was no way the demon kingdom could defeat them. Suddenly, the demon king appears, mocking the assembled forces. He tells them they were doing him a favor by gathering there, and now he will end them all in one swift blow. Fear spreads through the crowd, and people begin to flee. Despite their retreat, they cannot comprehend how the demon king has arrived, given that his kingdom lies miles away. As they run, the demon king conjures multiple magic circles in the sky, from which strange objects begin to fall. A cat-eared girl looks up in wonder, her breath catching as the very air grows suffocating. Another girl, recognizing the magnitude of the magic, murmurs that there was no way they could survive such an overwhelming force. The girl charged forward, determined to break through the demon king's defenses and strike at him. In response, the demon king erected a powerful barrier to protect himself. Despite the barrier, the girl didn't falter. As they clashed, their combined force created a massive explosion. Yet the girl remained standing. The demon king was stunned. He couldn't fathom how a weak human like her could reach him. He demanded to know what made her so strong, convinced there was no way a mere human could possess such power. He warned her not to think she could hide it from him, vowing that he would uncover the truth, one way or another. Sparks crackled around the girl as she replied, revealing that it was something the demon king would never understand. He was baffled by the idea of something beyond his comprehension. After all, he was the demon king. There was nothing in the world he couldn't grasp. His curiosity gnawed at him, and he questioned her once more that what could it possibly be? With unwavering resolve, the girl answered simply that it was love. The demon king asked incredulously if she was claiming that she had broken through his specially forged bloody manticore spine and dark matter barriers using nothing but the power of love. The girl blushed and shyly agreed. The demon king felt a strange discomfort. He had no concept of love or anything related to it. His mind filled with unsettling thoughts, but he forced himself to calm down. After all, he was a demon who had sought power for centuries, and surely there must be something, anything that he heard about the power of love. For the first time, his battle knowledge was challenged, but he could never let the enemy know that she was right, that he was, in fact, likely incapable of love and didn't even understand what it was. The girl playfully acted cute and asked if she was correct in assuming he truly didn't know what love was. The demon king was taken aback. How could she possibly know? Sweat began to bead on his forehead, and he snapped, insisting it was ridiculous. He was the most evil and powerful demon king, capable of anything, including love. He then referred to her as the hero of the human kingdom and declared that he would prove her wrong. In a rush of anger and embarrassment, he turned to leave, but she called after him, urging him to wait. Though she was frustrated, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed as well. The scene shifts to the demon king's castle, where his first general was shocked to hear that the demon king had retreated. The maid agreed, mentioning that the demon king had flown back to the castle in the middle of his battle with the hero. The first general, shocked, remarked that the demon king would never retreat from a fight and asked where he was now. The maid replied that since his return, the demon king had done nothing but sit there staring at the sky all day. The general wondered why the demon king was gazing at the sky. He then noticed that the demon king was mumbling to himself, so perhaps he was plotting new strategies to defeat the hero. But the demon king, lost in thought, questioned whether he was truly incapable of love and pondered what love even was. He loved war, did that count as love? Suddenly, the demon king stood up, declaring that he had made a decision. He was going to leave. The first general asked him to wait, but the demon king was already moving swiftly. The general hurried to follow him, warning him not to do anything rash and asking where he was going. Wherever the demon king went, the general vowed to follow and support him in any way possible. The demon king turned to him and simply replied that he was going to find love. The first general was stunned by this declaration. Taking on a human form, the demon king traveled to the human kingdom. As he walked through the bustling market, he marveled at how easily he had infiltrated the kingdom's defenses. He sought to experience firsthand the human life the hero was so proud of. Using his demon eye skill, he scanned the city and spotted a man harassing a young girl, telling her that he had liked her from the moment he laid eyes on her. He tried to reassure her, saying, "Don't be scared and let's have some fun." The demon king understood how it was done, but he knew that nothing could replace first-hand experience. He decided to try it out immediately. Spotting a girl walking alone, he guessed she might be unaccompanied and would make the perfect target. He approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder and telling her that he had liked her ever since he first saw her. But before he could continue, the girl turned and asked what it was. To his surprise, he realized that it was the hero he had encountered earlier. He wondered what she was doing there, puzzled by the unexpected encounter. Meanwhile, the first general followed the Demon King but was quickly lost in the crowd. The hero turned, wondering if he had just made a mistake by admitting that he liked her. He was sweating, fearing that she might laugh at him, especially if she discovered that he was the Demon King from the Demon Kingdom. He knew he had to come up with a convincing excuse, something human. So he mentioned that he admired her battle style, impressed by how she could effortlessly switch from melee combat to explosive magic in an instant. He thought any human would find that remarkable. She wondered about her battle style and asked how he knew about it. Then a realization struck her. Taking a step back, she remarked that only one person in the world knew that about her, and it was him. He had cornered her and forced her to fight with her full strength, which for the Demon King Dazol was bold indeed. She felt a wave of discomfort. She wasn't mentally prepared to face the Demon King again. Thinking back to their last conversation made her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Who would say something so cheesy in real life? It was mortifying. She had spent her whole life practicing magic, swordsmanship, and combat techniques to face him, but she had never prepared herself for how to speak to him. Instead, she ended up spouting nonsense, just trying to get him to stop talking. She wondered if it was all part of his trap. Maybe his last reaction had been a deception designed to catch her off guard. There was no way he would take her words seriously. As expected, the Demon King knew exactly how to toy with human emotions. She murmured to herself that she couldn't let this happen again. She called out to Goddess Stella, then focused on marking the aura around herself. Dazzle, on the other hand, thought it would be best to distance himself from her. The crowd began to wonder aloud if she was the holy maiden, the Lady Saint. One man agreed, saying that he could feel a warmth filling his heart. Others began to ask for her blessings, staring at her in awe. As they all continued to call her the Lady Saint, she felt a sense of confusion. The crowd surrounded her, and Dazzle would feel guilty if he just left her there like that. She repeatedly asked them to move away, warning them that it was dangerous. But no one listened. She felt that she would never forgive herself if innocent people were hurt because of her presence. Just then, Dazzle grabbed her hand, telling her to hold on, and with a snap, he made them both vanish from the scene. They reappeared in a room. C felt dizzy, as though her head was spinning, and she wondered what was happening. She realized she was sitting on Dazzle, her eyes still closed. He asked her how long she planned to stay like that. It wasn't that she was heavy, but the situation felt a little awkward. As she opened her eyes, she quickly realized her position and pulled back, confused about where she was and what he was doing. He casually explained that he could only teleport them to the last place he had marked, and the last place he had marked was his bedroom because he had once marked it while trying to hurry back from the bathroom in the middle of the night. Her face turned red as she wondered if she was really in his room. Dazzle confirmed, telling her that Devar was currently in his castle, deep within the Demon Kingdom. She grew angry, asking if he truly expected her to believe that he was trying to help her. He insisted that it was true. In response, she summoned 2 shining swords with a flick of her power and declared that she would end him right now. Meanwhile, outside Dazzle's bedroom, the maid heard the sounds and recognized Dazzle's voice. She opened the door, apologizing and excusing herself, saying she thought he was going on a trip. What she saw made her stop in her tracks. The girl was with Dazzle, demanding that the Demon King let her go. The girl accused him of trying to play dirty, setting her up and attempting to lock her away in his dungeon. Dazzle, somewhat puzzled, wondered why she would think such things. He could easily dominate her without resorting to any of that. The maid, blushing from the awkwardness of the situation, quickly rushed out, apologizing for interrupting, claiming she hadn't known he was engaged in such activities. Dazzle, still confused, wondered what exactly the maid thought was happening. The scene shifted to the human kingdom, where the girl had finally returned. It had been quite the ordeal, and she thought she could spend some time sightseeing in the town after representing the Holy Church at the exhausting noble meeting. Instead, she had encountered the Demon King. She lay down on her bed, reflecting on the encounter. The Demon King had acted as if he wanted to fight, but she hadn't even drawn her sword. She wondered what his intentions were. Was there another trick in his mind? After losing her resolve to fight, she had decided to leave. The long journey, flying from the Demon Kingdom to the human kingdom and dealing with the demon, had drained her. However, she was relieved that the academy would be starting the next day. At least within the Holy Church grounds, away from Dazzle's demonic presence, she could find some peace. The next day at the Goddess Stella Academy, the Educational Institute of the Holy Church, she stood in the corridor, feeling incredibly sleepy. She had spent the entire night searching for the Demon King, but he had vanished as quickly as he appeared. As she looked around, she noticed a crowd gathered below. Curious, she wondered what was going on. A girl nearby explained that it was the new admission day, and she had heard that many talented young people had signed up, inspired by the Lady Saint. She laughed to herself, thinking that as a saint, she wasn't supposed to enroll in the academy. Instead, she should focus on her training to fight the Demon King. But sometimes she wanted to feel normal, so she'd asked the head priest if she was allowed to attend the Holy Church Academy. To her surprise, the head priest had approved her request. It must have been because they wanted her to promote the academy, encouraging more people to join the cause to fight the Demon King and his generals. Suddenly, she was shocked to see the Demon King and his general among the new students. She wondered what they were doing there. The general asked Dazel why they were enrolling in a human academy, especially when the place had a holy scent that made him sick. Dazel replied that he had heard about the academy while investigating the residence of the hero. The general was taken aback upon hearing this. Dazel explained that it was no different from a battle. If he wanted to understand her better, he needed to understand her environment as well. It turned out that stumbling upon the academy was a fortunate coincidence. The general was deeply emotional, realizing that the Demon King had finally come to his senses. He truly wanted to fight the heroes seriously, and that's why he was there. He could sense that their victory was getting closer. Dazel nodded, telling him that one should always keep their friends close, but their enemies even closer. The general agreed, stating that he would assist the Demon King in uncovering everything about the hero. Other students, watching the scene unfold, could only stare in silence. A lady stepped forward to announce that before they could start the test, everyone would need to give an offering to Goddess Stella. Both Dazel and his general exchanged glances, noticing the stark separation in the social classes. Dazel glanced at a purple crystal and thought it should be good enough. He placed it on the table, followed by several more, which shocked the priests. The general understood their reaction. The crystals were the highest quality materials, super rare gems that could turn weapons into legendary artifacts. Dazel's wealth alone far surpassed that of the entire human kingdom, even during their most prosperous years. He belonged in the finest seat, far beyond what humans could offer. The two priests hurriedly moved to destroy the forbidden objects from the demon land, but the lady instructed them to simply burn them, declaring them unholy. Dazel and his general, however, watched as they were placed in the Law of Rings. The time came for the participants to fire at the targets. A boy went first, hitting all of them perfectly with ease and casually mentioning that it was nothing. His peers praised him, calling him the best. The general noted that for the higher offering students, the distance was only 10 meters, while for the Law of Rings, it was 100 meters. He thought to himself that it was clearly easier for those who had given larger offerings, and he wondered about the humans' obsession with social standing. The priest called for the next participant, Dazel. He had to hit the target from 100 meters away. The boy before him wished him good luck. The general glanced at the boy, thinking he should know his place there. Meanwhile, Dazel observed the girls who were openly expressing their admiration for the boy, telling him that they loved him. Dazel thought to himself that in order to receive such affection, a person must prove their competence, even if they were poor. If that was the case, then he would take the test seriously and give it his all. Without hesitation, Dazel used Meteor Storm to attack the targets. The meteors were enormous, causing a wave of shock among the onlookers at the sight of such ancient magic. The general turned to Dazel and remarked that it was only a level 1 meteor storm, though it looked far more significant due to its sheer power. Just then, the hero girl arrived, using her sanctuary banishment to protect the building. She created a barrier that blocked the meteor storm, preventing it from causing any damage. She then stormed toward Dazel, anger evident in her eyes, and grabbed him by the collar. She asked what he wanted. Dazel referred to her simply as Hero. She responded by mentioning that he had suddenly disappeared in the middle of their fight only to appear out of nowhere in the city. She added that he even teleported her to his bedroom. The other students and Dazel's general were shocked by her words. The hero continued, explaining that when she was finally about to get some sleep, exhausted from the ordeal, Dazel showed up again, just outside her room. She asked him if he had any idea how much sleep she had been lacking because of him. Then, with a scowl, she asked if he wanted to fight, in which case they could just do it. A lady with a flushed face approached the hero, asking if Dazel was her friend. She apologized, but suggested that they move their private conversation elsewhere. The hero realized her own embarrassment and quickly corrected her words, saying there was no such relationship between her and Dazel. She stopped mid-thought, considering that if the truth about Dazel being the demon lord were to get out, it would cause chaos. Having the demon king within the holy church's grounds, right in the middle of the city, would prompt all of the church's paladins and warriors to respond. Casualties would be countless, and she wondered what she should do. Dazel then asked the lady if he could take the test again, as the hero had interrupted him last time. The hero raised an eyebrow, questioning whether that was really the issue at hand. She sighed and apologized, explaining that the rules only allowed for one attempt. However, since he was apparently in a close relationship with the hero, she would allow him to pass the test. She also mentioned that with such a powerful meteor attack, they could easily wipe out the Demon King's army. Dazel remarked that his relationship with the hero was whatever she thought it was. Just then, the general stepped in, mentioning that he was also acquainted with the hero and that he, too, could summon a meteor. He mused that he couldn't let the hero fail the test, especially since he had to stay close to his king. A few days later, both Dazael and the general were dressed in their school uniforms, and Dazael looked surprisingly good in it. He simply replied that it was just a uniform. Suddenly, the general noticed the symbol of the Holy Church near Dazael's face on the clothes. When Dazael pointed out that there was one on the general's uniform as well, the general quickly brushed it off. Dazael observed that everyone was staring at him. The general commented that it was because he had displayed such a magnificent meteor storm, and it was obvious the humans were admiring him. Dazael wondered if that was truly the case. However, he sensed something different from the kind of admiration the other students had shown him during the test. The general was right in thinking that the people's views were quite different. They were angry at Dazael for taking the hero to his room, and they suspected that he had intimidated the examiner into allowing him to enroll without making an offering. They saw it as a dirty tactic, and murmurs of discontent spread among the crowd. Dazael and his general were walking when he mentioned that he wondered what kind of training the academy people would conduct. The general replied that it was only the first day, so it would probably be a 200 kilometers run as a warm-up. Dazael asked if that wasn't too basic, suggesting they should probably have the trainees fight a dozen minotaurs or something. The general agreed, acknowledging it was a possibility, and added that whatever it was, Dazael would excel. The general then wondered if they were truly in demon territory and asked if Dazael felt any danger or malicious presence. Dazael pointed towards the hero standing some distance away and remarked that he could see her. The general thought that the hero hadn't even tried to hide, and even though she was glaring at them, they both ignored her. Dazael suggested they pretend not to have noticed her. The general was still bothered, muttered that it seemed troublesome. The hero then called out, demanding that they stop ignoring her. She ran toward them, insisting they hear her out, as she knew they could. She had a lot to say about what happened the other day. As she turned the corner, she found that they had disappeared. In frustration, she cried out, asking them to wait, explaining that she only wanted to talk. Why didn't anyone listen to her? She felt that even the headmistress blamed her for everything, but she couldn't tell the truth. Doing so would only cause chaos. She sat there, crying, wondering why this had to happen to her. Suddenly, Dazael appeared in front of her and asked what she wanted to talk about. She stood up, glaring at him, and he remarked that he heard she wanted to talk. He then asked if she had been crying. In response, she kicked him, insisting that she wasn't crying. Despite the pressure of his presence, she said she wouldn't cry in front of a demon, though tears still lingered in her eyes. He stopped her leg with a single finger, wondering what was in her eyes. She replied that she was angry and asked if he knew how much trouble he had caused her. She challenged him, saying that if you want to fight, so let's do it. She thought to herself that demons were supposed to be straightforward and fair in battle, but if he was just toying with her to make her life miserable, it would be the worst of all. His face reddened slightly as he said he didn't mean it like that, but he was hesitating to express what he truly wanted to say. She shouted at him, urging him to hurry up and speak. His face turned completely red as he confessed that wanted to understand the meaning of love, and that's the only reason he came to the human school. She forced a laugh, controlling her emotions, and Dazael thought to himself that she must be so happy to be proven right. Now she understood why he had told her the truth. She turned to leave, saying that he was the Demon King and that she wasn't supposed to trust him, as her duty was to protect her people. Yet for some reason, she felt like he was telling the truth. If that was the case, maybe what he was trying to do wasn't entirely bad. She considered that if he got to know humans better, it might be part of his next move against the human kingdom. For now, she decided to let him do what he came for, but she swore she would keep an eye on him. If he hurt anyone in the kingdom, she would fight him with everything she had. She asked if he understood. Dazael promised her, calling her by name Sylvia. He swore that he would keep his word. She grew annoyed and told him not to call her by her name so casually. He then asked if he should refer to her as Hero or Lady Saint. She denied both titles, finding them too embarrassing. The scene shifts to the Demon Kingdom, where Luna, the maid, arrived at just the right moment. The second general of the demon army was looking for her. He mentioned that the king had asked her to return, but he couldn't find him anywhere. He then asked Luna if something had happened that he wasn't aware of and why everyone always left him in the dark. Luna replied that the king had been acting strangely lately. The last time she saw him, he had brought a girl into his chamber. She had only caught glimpses of the girl, but she was certain the girl was human and had a strong, holy aura. The second general was surprised to hear about the holy aura and wondered if the king might be under the influence of some human church's evil spell. Just then, they heard the door open, and someone appeared in front of the king's room. Luna was surprised and explained that the Demon King had said he wouldn't be back for a while. Upon closer inspection, they saw that the person was wearing the emblem of the Stella Church, confirming the general's suspicions. The second general rushed toward the person, ready to punch him, declaring that he wouldn't let anyone control their king. However, it turned out that the person was actually the first general. Furious, the first general confronted the second general, asking how he dared to punch him and accusing him of trying to kill the first general and take his position. The second general, taken aback, denied the accusation and explained that he had just returned and found no one around. He asked what was going on. Levirian wondered how the second general had come to the conclusion that there would be an enemy. He explained that he had been teleported there by the king and expressed confidence in his assessment. Levirian then said something to the second general that caught him off guard. The second general was surprised to hear about the secret infiltration of the enemy's base. Levirian agreed, stating that it was indeed dangerous and that he would accompany the king alone. He then gave a lecture, boasting that he was the best of all the 7 generals and always invited everywhere. He asked the second general to remember the time when the king entrusted the front lines to him, and then continued saying many other things. The second general jokingly mentioned that if both of them were gone, he would take the demon king's throne. But the first general immediately shouted at him, warning him not to think such things as they were not dead yet. The scene then shifts to the human kingdom at Goddess Stella Academy, where Dazael and Levirian were walking. Dazael received a notice and mentioned that he was late the previous day and hadn't yet understood the class system at the academy. Levirian apologized for not being able to accompany his king to the new student ceremony. Dazael reassured him, saying not to worry about it. He admitted that it was his fault for forgetting to teleport Levirian back. Levirian mentioned that at the academy, students were free to choose their job classes, and he was flattered that Dazael had chosen the same class as him. He asked what job class Dazael had selected. Dazael replied that he had been a bit lost in that section, so he simply chose the one that kept mentioning demons, thinking it must be easy for demons like them. When Levirian saw the class Dazael had chosen, he was surprised and said that an exorcist was a job that required expertise in holy magic to kill demons. Dazael reassured him, saying not to worry about it. It was just for the human students in their early education. Levirian agreed, noting that they started from E-class as well, meaning they were dealing with low-grade exorcists. He added that what's the worst that could happen? Sylvia, overhearing the conversation, remarked that being an exorcist was perfect and that they would be in the same training ground since she had chosen the same class. Levirian turned to see her, shocked that she was also an exorcist. She responded, saying not to get too worked up yet, as she wasn't there to pick a fight. Dazael asked what she was doing there. Sylvia replied that she had told him before that she would keep an eye on him, and now that he had chosen the same job class as her, it made her work much easier. She added that if he ever do anything weird, well, who knows, and accidents happen in the exorcist training ground, and accidents were only dangerous to demons. Dazael remarked that it sounded like a really good evil plan. Levirian asked Sylvia if she was calling Harshal a hero. Sylvia apologized if she didn't sound like a hero, joking that the demons were rubbing off on her. Then Sylvia overheard a few girls gossiping about her, speculating that she was talking to a boy and wondering if he was her boyfriend. She felt embarrassed to hear this and turned to Dazael, telling him to mark her words and not do anything stupid, weird, or suspicious. She emphasized that no one could ever learn who he truly was. Dazael then asked who she thought she was talking to, and noting that they were the 2 strongest demons in the world and blending in among humans was a breeze. Levirian thought about Dazael's words. Sylvia agreed, and as the bell rang, she noted that it was time for the morning prayer. Dazael wondered aloud about the morning prayer. At 7 o'clock a.m., the time for prayer had arrived inside Goddess Estella Academy's church. As they were all present, Sylvia noticed that Dazael and Levirian both seemed to feel an unexpected warmth inside, realizing it was definitely not a breeze. After the prayer, the 2 boys were walking down the corridor. One of them had a job for the next hour, and the other boy replied that he had become a paladin, his armor animated, and that he could stay safe, even against strong demons. The first boy agreed, saying that he wanted to become an exorcist and thought it would be cool to use multiple magic combos. Since he was good with a sword, he chose to be a Templar instead. A noble boy bumped into them, and one of the 2 boys told him to watch where he was going. The noble boy, angered, wondered how they dared to speak back to him. He called them commoners and told them to know their place. Without responding, the 2 boys continued walking, ignoring the noble boy. Dazael and Levirian walked together, with Levirian leaning on Dazael for support. The noble boy thought to himself that they must be new students in dark uniforms. He rushed toward them, thinking that if they were commoners trying to get close to the saint, the girl whom even nobles held in high respect. They were nothing but cocky peasants. He decided to teach the commoner a lesson by bumping into him using his superior strength. As he got close to Dazael, he ordered him to get out of the way. When he bumped into Dazael, however, his shoulder bone shattered into pieces. He was set crashing into the wall and screamed in pain, calling out for a medic. Levirian, noticing the shattered window from the impact, remarked that he had broken the mirror-like glass with his power. He wondered how the boy had dared to bump into his king on purpose. In a cold voice, he vowed to chop the boy into pieces and throw him to the hungry monsters of the demon kingdom. The boy, horrified by the threat, was left in shock. Levirian sent the boy flying into the sky and told him to rejoice as his life would be taken by the great demon king's #1 subordinate. Dazael remarked that Levirian was done for. Suddenly, Dazael sensed a sweet and thick holy aura, along with the sound of footsteps and a voice. A girl walked alongside Sylvia and asked her why she was smiling. Was something good happening? Sylvia replied that she was excited for her exorcist class and wondered what kind of lesson they would give to the civilians. Dazel reminded Sylvia of her earlier words, saying that if she saw him hurting anyone, she would continue the fight with everything she had. As Levirian prepared to attack the boy, Dazel activated his hyper-acceleration, which would only take a second. But with Sylvia so close, Dazel worried that he might not make it in time. If he failed, Sylvia would kick him out of the academy, and he would lose his only chance to study about love. With no other choice, he used level 5 ancient dark magic to control time and space, making Levirian and the boy vanish just as Sylvia arrived. Sylvia turned to the girl and told her that she was already so skilled at support and healing, she would probably get bored in the priest's job class. The girl responded saying that Sylvia was the one who should join the same class as her for a change. She admitted that she was terrible at making new friends and might get lonely if she was left all alone. Sylvia wondered why she had felt a very strong surge of dark magic just a moment ago. She then told herself that she couldn't let her guard down, as she had a strong reason to stay in the exorcist class. She stared at Dazel, who seemed surprised to see her there. She asked him what he was up to. Dazel was sweating heavily and wondered why she thought he was involved in something. He thought to himself that no matter how idiotic Siddharth might seem, he was still the Demon King, and there were possibilities that everything was an act, hiding some ulterior motive. If that was the case, Sylvia decided she would scan the entire academy grounds for any traces of dark magic. She activated her enhanced holy senses to check every corner of the academy. Her friend wondered why Sylvia had activated her skill. Sylvia thought it was better to be cautious and decided to use all her holy skill buffs to protect the academy and its inhabitants from any potential dark magic. She invoked Atonement, Guardian Spirit, Divine Song, Angel's Mercy, Radiance, Expurgo, Hand of Gladius, and the Rite of Redemption. All the students started glowing, wondering if it was the power of the holy light. One girl felt blessed all of a sudden. A boy remarked that it was the power of the Lady Saint. Another boy wondered aloud if they were under attack. A student ran ahead, telling everyone to prepare countermeasures. Dazel was sweating profusely, feeling as though he were being trampled. He wondered why Sylvia was going all out. Was she really mad at him? It seemed like she was seriously considering kicking him out of the academy. Sylvia observed his expression and thought he looked like he was carrying something heavy. It was as if he was compressing his dark magic to the point where she couldn't sense it. Realizing this, she activated more holy protection and a giant aura surrounded her. After using this protection on the entire academy, she pointed at Dazel and declared that she couldn't find anything suspicious. She would let him off the hook this time, but if he ever did anything weird again, she swore there would be consequences. As she walked away with her friend, the girl asked if they fought often. Sylvia nodded and replied that they could say she was born to fight him. The girl wondered if it was a couple's quarrel. Sylvia quickly responded that it wasn't, and her duty was to protect the people. She hadn't even considered dating, especially since Dazel was the Demon King. Meanwhile, behind the academy building, Levirian was on his knees, begging Dazel for forgiveness. He admitted he hadn't thought it through when releasing the demonic aura and acknowledged that it had jeopardized their disguise in front of the humans, to the point they had no choice but to intervene. Levirian lamented that he was useless and begged the Demon King to grant him the greatest permission, ordering him to kill 100 King Hydras or 1,000,000 monsters within 24 hours. Dazel replied that Levirian didn't need to think about such things. Levirian began to cry, expressing how kind the Demon King was. Dazel, however, thought that it wasn't kindness but rather a necessity. He had used his time and space control ancient magic skill to avoid attracting attention, something he could have done long ago. If he hadn't, the hero might have figured it out. Dazel then asked what they were going to do with the boy. He would rather not shed any blood while they were there. Levirian answered that he had taught the boy a very valuable lesson that even trash could become the Demon King's loyal follower. The boy, battered and bruised, murmured that the Demon King was the strongest in the world and that he was the best. Levirian, with a smile, commented on how beautiful it was to hear such words in that holy place. Since the boy had become a slightly better human being, Levirian decided to give him a present. Using his dark regeneration magic, Levirian healed the boy's injuries. The boy was surprised to find that his hand no longer hurt, but his shock only deepened when he saw the changes. He attempted to break the wall effortlessly, amazed at his newfound strength. Levirian looked on and asked if the boy found it impressive. He had upgraded the boy's hand, granting him the power of a demon so that he wouldn't embarrass himself as the Demon King's devoted follower. The boy, amazed by the power in his new demon hand, lifted a massive tree effortlessly. He exclaimed that it was so strong and he could destroy anything with that, and that was so cool. Dazel watched with fascination, realizing that humans, too, crave power. It was truly an intriguing sight. The boy, caught up in his newfound strength, thought to himself that this was the way he could easily rise to the rank of Knight of the Church. However, as long as he had that demon hand, he feared the church would kill him before he could accomplish anything, leaving him deeply worried about his future. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the demon castle that same night, where Levirian spoke to Luna. He told her that it was his first time experiencing Dazel's control over time and space, and the sensation left him both awed and unsettled. At the demon castle, Dazel and Levirian assumed their human forms. Dazel turned to Levirian and reminded him to maintain their cover with the humans, asking if he was ready. When Levirian agreed, Dazel cast the teleportation spell. Levirian couldn't help but think that no general had ever traveled through teleportation as much as he had. Dazel suggested they head to the human kingdom, and in an instant they both materialized in a bustling market. The people were taken aback, murmuring in disbelief as they wondered if the two had appeared out of thin air, and how it was even possible. One onlooker even commented that neither of them seemed entirely human. Dazel surmised that he would need to adjust the teleportation point and instructed Levirian to manage the situation. Levirian agreed, though he added that he would eliminate any witnesses. Dazel, however, told him it would be sufficient to simply erase their memories. Afterward, Dazel approached a mansion and confidently assured Levirian that everything would be fine. He set the teleportation point on the mansion's wall and remarked that it was now done. Just then, Sylvia emerged from the building and asked what he was doing in front of her door. Dazel replied that he was setting a new teleportation point as no one ever passed through this area, making it a safe spot. Sylvia, however, mentioned that it was her private residence. Afterward, the group made their way to their exorcist class, where the instructor, Edward Endure, greeted them and introduced himself. He explained that every year there were both promising and underperforming students, with more commoners than nobles in the class. However, in his eyes, they were all chosen ones. Edward demonstrated his advanced light magic, advanced fire magic, and expertise in close combat, declaring that by the end of the course, he would make them masters of all these skills, allowing them to proudly call themselves exorcists. He emphasized that their ultimate goal was to specialize in defeating humanity's greatest enemy, demons. As he spoke, he was sweating profusely, secretly impressed with himself for managing to activate multiple types of magic at once, something he considered quite challenging. While Dazel and Levirian remained unimpressed, their other classmates were amazed by his display and praised him. Levirian, however, thought it was rather ordinary, remarking that in the kingdom, even an infant could activate 5 types of magic simultaneously. Edward, undeterred, told them not to forget that they were special and had been chosen by the great hero lady saint for this class. He assured them that with him as their instructor, the greatest exorcist of all time, there was no one more qualified to teach them this path. Edward also proudly mentioned that he had once faced the Demon King in battle, standing alone against such a powerful foe. Levirian was shocked to hear that. Edward continued, explaining that long before the hero lady saint was even born, he had earned fame for a legendary battle. He couldn't help but feel a sense of shame every time he remembered that day, the day the Demon King had inflicted those bonds upon him. Levirian turned to Dazel and asked if that was true, wondering why he had never heard of this man before. Dazel, too, was unaware of who Edward was. Edward went on to say that everyone knew about the infamous Battle of Twin Valley, and he could still recall it vividly. Even after 25 years, he remembered the terror he felt when the Demon King unleashed that dreadful attack. At that moment, Dazel finally recognized Edward. Levirian, still skeptical, asked if it was really true. He mentioned that he had read everything about the wars Dazel had fought in and followed his actions down to the smallest detail, but there was no mention of such a man. Dazel replied that he remembered hearing about Edward from the soldiers a few years ago, recalling how Edward had trembled in fear during that time. Levirian remarked that it was impressive how Dazel could even remember the most trivial details about someone. Dazel brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Meanwhile, Sylvia, intrigued by their conversation, wondered what those two were so excitedly chatting about. She suspected they were likely plotting some evil scheme. Edward then called for the group to gather, holding a blue stone. He explained that he wanted to test it, demonstrating that for exorcists, magic was of utmost importance. He wanted to observe how they each used it. Edward told them not to worry if they couldn't scratch the stone, as it had been specially designed for the church's knights' practice and was resistant to damage. He then asked if anyone had questions. Only Sylvia raised her hand, asking what would happen if they only used light magic for the practice, as she believed it was the most important element for exorcists. Edward smiled, complimenting her for her insight. He was honored that she was so eager for his class. He then instructed everyone to use the basic light spell, Beam. Sylvia thought it was a good choice, believing that since demons couldn't use light magic, Dazel would likely give up and leave the school peacefully. Edward turned to Dazel and asked him to begin. Dazel spoke briefly with Levirian, asking if it was fine to proceed. Levirian agreed, acknowledging that it wasn't perfect, but it was all the calculations he had managed to gather in the few minutes they had. Dazel reassured him, saying it was enough for now and that he would perfect it on his own. He thanked Levirian for his assistance. Then Dazzle stepped forward, explaining that he would consider the magic particles in the air and create just the right amount of radiation in the form of light. He would then combine this with a specific formulation of the spell, reversing the basic dark route to mimic the holy characteristics of light. It was time to try dark-style light magic. As he focused on creating the lightning ball in his hand, the pressure built up so intensely that it left Levirian in awe. Sylvia, too, was stunned by the sight. The instructor, along with the other students, was stunned by the sight. Sylvia feared that the light magic created by the Demon King could lead to a catastrophe, and she knew she had to act. As Dazzle was preparing to unleash his attacks, Sylvia summoned her strongest power to halt it. Levirian, observing her actions, understood that she intended to ruin Dazzle's grand moment, so he had to stop her from taking any further action. Sylvia used her most powerful divine Dispel seal, while Levirian countered with his ultimate dark enhanced magic. Sylvia attempted to seal Dazzle's magic, but found that the ordinary Dispel wouldn't work on the spell of the Demon King's caliber. However, her Holy Barrier seal, which was directly connected to her will, remained unbroken. Levirian reassured Dazzle, telling him not to worry, as he would pour all of his dark energy into the attack. He then released a powerful beam aimed at the barrier. Dazzle watched as the beam struck the barrier, causing a massive explosion. Edward, bewildered by the sequence of events, wondered aloud how the light at first appeared and now an explosion followed. He questioned what was truly happening. As the fog began to clear, Dazzle and Sylvia were both on their knees. Levirian hurried to Dazzle, apologizing for disrupting his incredible demonstration. Sylvia, rising to her feet, acknowledged that it was all her fault. The magic was still unstable, and she would have to refine it further to perfect it. Dazzle got up, messaging that it was still impossible to contain 2 consecutive spells from high-level demons, and that he needed to practice more. Sylvia then asked him why she looked like him, to which he responded by asking the same question. Levirian was shocked to hear such a thing. After a while, the 3 of them went to a quiet place where they soon realized that Dazzle and Sylvia had swapped bodies. Dazzle, now in Sylvia's body, confessed that in his 1,700 years of life, this was the first time he had experienced such a magical rebound. He speculated that there must have been a flaw in his formula for reversing dark magic into light magic, which could have been tampered with by the Holy Bind and Dark Enhance. He wondered aloud if the holy magic wasn't, in fact, fascinating. Sylvia, now in Dazzle's body, told him that he could be fascinated by it later, but for now, she asked him to turn her back to normal as she couldn't keep up with covering for both of them. Dazzle replied that he had never experienced anything like this before, and although they didn't have a library filled with all sorts of information about magic, he thought Levirian might know more. Levirian responded that it was indeed a great idea, and he would help, but except for the parts related to human holy magic. He can deliberately erase those from his memories. Sylvia promptly hit him for that. Dazzle, using his power, stated that the situation couldn't be held any longer, and they would sneak into the royal library at midnight when everyone had fallen asleep. In the meantime, he would hide in her room and asked her to return to her own room. Sylvia was shocked by the suggestion, insisting that she couldn't let anyone see her looking like this. If she went back to her room, everyone would get the wrong idea. Dazzle suddenly disappeared from the scene. Later that night, in his demon form and occupying Sylvia's body, Dazzle arrived to meet her. He told her it was time to go, and Levirian was keeping watch, ensuring they could enter the castle safely. Sylvia, now in Dazzle's body, remarked that he had finally arrived, and since no one was around, they were safe to proceed. As she glanced at her real body, dressed in the unusual attire, she inquired about it. Dazzle explained that it was his usual clothing when he was at home and that her clothes weren't practical for combat. She then asked why anyone would wear combat attire at home. Dazzle responded that they didn't have much time, so he would teleport them both. Sylvia asked him to wait, but he grabbed her hand and they both teleported to Dazzle's bedroom. Dazzle opened the door, urging Sylvia to enter quickly before anyone saw them. However, Luna was standing right by the door. The moment it opened, she froze and the door quickly shut again. Both Dazzle and Sylvia broke into a cold sweat. Luna, unsure of what she had just witnessed, wondered if she had misinterpreted the situation. She decided to retreat before anyone noticed her and apologize, saying she would pretend she hadn't seen anything. As they both entered the library, Sylvia quickly realized that their efforts were in vain. Dazzle replied that they had simply found ways not to reverse their bodies back. Even with the combination of reversal spells and the complex returning magic formula, nothing worked, which he found utterly fascinating. Sylvia remarked that their small bodies were much worse than expected. Dazzle reassured her, saying that they would grow back to their normal size in about 5 minutes or so. As morning came, Dazzle heard the sound of people stirring and mentioned that soon the place would be filled with teenagers. Sylvia, still in Dazzle's body, was shocked and pointed out that they hadn't changed back yet. She also asked why the young demons were so eager to go to the library. Dazzle wondered aloud how else they could learn to grow stronger. He then suggested they teleport back to the academy. Sylvia asked him to wait, explaining that she couldn't return to her room like this. She couldn't just go missing either. It would cause chaos at the academy and even in the kingdom. The people couldn't find out about their situation, so it couldn't be helped. They would have to pretend that she was Dazel until they found a way to switch their bodies back. Dazel acknowledged that there was no way around it. However, he mused that it had been a while since he had gained any new insights about catalog power. If he were to remain in Sylvia's body, he might have unlimited access to the secrets of human love. He mentioned that the opportunity to impersonate a princess like this couldn't be missed, and he would gladly act as her. Sylvia, still in Dazel's body, wondered why he was so excited and asked what kind of opportunity he was talking about. Dazel apologized, explaining that he couldn't share the details as she would probably get in his way. Sylvia replied that his words were becoming more suspicious by the moment. Unbeknownst to them, someone had been listening to their conversation while hiding nearby. Sylvia, still in Dazel's body, marveled at the situation. She felt the body was exceptionally sturdy, filled with a strong flow of magic. As expected of someone called unbeatable, Dazel must have worked incredibly hard to achieve this level of power. Then she realized what she was thinking and quickly corrected herself. She shouldn't be praising her enemy, but it was difficult to stop herself, especially when she hadn't even seen his body. She wondered how he had changed so seamlessly without looking at her body. But Dazel and Sylvia's body snapped his fingers and changed back in an instant. Afterward, he used his power, thinking that even in such a small body, his magic, such as teleportation, could still be withstood without issue. The flow of power was immense. Sylvia realized how much Dazel must have practiced. Every engagement showed just how far he had gone in mastering his magic. Dazel then called out to her, commenting that her body was quite nice. Sylvia, a little flustered, referred to him as a pervert, saying that she had known it all along. As Dazel walked in Sylvia's body, one of her friends called out to her, and he realized she was referring to him. The girl asked if anything had happened, mentioning that she hadn't seen Sylvia since the previous day and thought they were supposed to have lunch together. Dazel quickly recognized the girl as Sylvia's friend. In Sylvia's voice, Dazel replied that she had lunch with other friends. The girl seemed confused and asked what she meant by that, as she was supposed to be Sylvia's only friend. Noticing something off about Sylvia's behavior, the girl pressed further, asking if she was hiding something. Dazel, thinking over the situation, realized that Hamish had calculated things accurately. He couldn't believe that the hero of the human kingdom only had a single friend, and he hadn't found anything else that could explain this. In such an unfavorable situation, Dazel knew there was only one course of action: find the enemy's weakness. Using his demon's eye, Dazel observed that Sylvia's eyes were now glowing red, which unnerved the girl. She asked if Sylvia had something in her eyes and offered to heal it for her. Dazel noted that the color of her magic circuit was almost yellow, indicating the presence of the holy element, which suggested that the girl might belong to a support-type class. Just then, Dazel spotted Levirian, who appeared unwell after the morning prayer. It seemed like a fortunate coincidence. After that, the girl pointed to Levirian, telling Dazel that he appeared unwell and she wanted to help him. The girl agreed, and upon seeing Levirian, she called out to him, asking if he was okay. Levirian looked at Dazel, who subtly indicated something, and wondered what his king was trying to communicate. Dazel, thinking quickly, decided that Levirian should keep the girl occupied and prevent her from getting any closer. Levirian, understanding the silent cue, realized that the girl posed a potential threat and decided to handle her accordingly. He was surprised that such a tiny girl could pose such a danger to his king. Levirian then asked the girl what made her so special, urging her to tell him everything about herself. Dazel, though not entirely sure what Levirian was saying to the girl, was satisfied that he was keeping her distracted. On the other hand, Sylvia in Dazel's body lay on the floor, trembling, and wondered what was wrong with her body. It felt like she was burning from the inside. She quickly realized what had happened. When a demon was forced to do the morning prayer, their body underwent a reaction. She couldn't understand why Dazel had gone so far for something as trivial as love. After all, wasn't he the demon king, the most feared being in the world? He shouldn't take her words so seriously. She knew she had to get out of the church. Eventually, she confronted him, demanding he admit that he was doing something suspicious with her body again. When he denied it, she insisted that they couldn't keep going like this and that they needed to hurry to figure out how to switch their bodies back. Dazel, however, thought that he couldn't let her know that he had been using her body to inquire about love. For some reason, everyone became nervous or their faces turned red when he brought it up, which made him realize it must be a highly guarded national secret, something sacred or even taboo to talk about. As they walked together, they overheard other girls whispering about the nature of their relationship, speculating that they might be in love. Sylvia, still in Dazel's body, felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She had a bad feeling about what was being said. Instructor Edward approached, visibly frustrated, and pointed out that it was only the first week, yet they were arriving late to his class. He looked especially angry with Dazel, but in reality it was Sylvia in Dazel's body. He demanded that she do 100 push-ups as punishment. Edward clarified that he didn't mean any offense to her personally, but reminded her that she could join the class right away. As Sylvia started to do the push-ups, Dazel, observing the situation, remarked that this was how privilege worked among humans. Sylvia, still struggling with the push-ups, apologized, acknowledging that she was currently at a disadvantage. Once the push-ups were over, Edward instructed the students to listen carefully. For that day's field practice, they were going to participate in a special activity, a friendly match of tag against another class. The students were surprised, unsure if it would be fair to play against another class. The Exorcist class, after all, only had a small number of students. One of them reassured the others, noting that they had Sylvia on their side, so there was nothing to worry about. Another student speculated that their opponents might be from the priest class, hoping they would be less physically imposing. Edward quickly silenced them, and just as he did, the Templar class arrived. The Exorcist students were taken aback. The Templar class had rejected all new non-noble students and were known as the elite class. Nearly all of their members were male heirs from influential noble families. Dazel wondered why they looked so smart and what their specialty was. Sylvia mentioned that their expertise was in combat and that they had been trained to master the 7 elements of magic. Their fighting style involved compressing that magic to create powerful weapons. Dazel replied that she remembered fighting something similar, though not as annoying as her unpredictable fighting style. Sylvia responded that it came directly from the Demon King himself, and she took that as a compliment. As Edward was conversing with the leader of those individuals, Dazel wondered if he was the same person from the entrance exam. She then noticed the boy looking toward her. He bowed respectfully towards Sylvia's body, expressing that it was an honor to meet her again. He admitted that he would never forget the moment when she had dazzled them with her amazing meteor magic during the entrance exam. That exhibition had motivated them to train hard in the hopes of becoming as strong as her one day. Dazel, in Sylvia's body, thought to herself that at last it was Sylvia's skill at play. The boy then pointed to Dazel's body, saying that Sylvia had helped him get into the Holy Academy, while Dazel had done nothing during the exam. He added that now all the lowly peasants did was follow her around. Dazel, still inhabiting Sylvia's body, replied that it was because she was interested, to the point where she couldn't even sleep, thinking about it all. He thought he was invested in her secret, which was why he followed her around, though he had forgotten that he was in her body, which likely confused them. The man wondered if that was really the case, and if so, if it was what she truly wanted. He decided not to question it further. Edward then spoke up, saying that since they were all present, he would humbly offer them an invitation. The boy replied that they would be truly honored if the Lady Saint wished to join their class, where only the best of the best received the best facilities, truly the right place for someone like her. He'd assured them that all the noble families there would offer her their utmost support. However, Dazel, inhabiting Sylvia's body, denied the offer, leaving the boy shocked. Sylvia, in Dazel's body, stepped closer and asked what he was doing. She reminded him that it was her body and to be more careful. He questioned if that wasn't true and wondered if she could even fight against him. He suggested that at the very least, she should be asking for the king's chair or something of greater value. She replied that it wasn't how things worked there. Sylvia mentioned that she would rather remain in the same class as him so she could keep an eye on him, something she had said herself. Her face turned red and she reluctantly agreed. The boy, sensing her reaction, asked if she was willing to make a bet. If they won the match, would Sylvia be willing to join their class? Sylvia agreed, and the boy responded enthusiastically, saying that it was a great honor and that it was now decided. Sylvia, in Dazel's body, asked him to stop. As they both began to leave, he reassured her, saying there was no need to worry and it would all be fine. She replied that there was plenty to worry about. Dazel, still in Sylvia's body, turned to her, pointing out that she had forgotten one important thing. He was currently the hero of the human kingdom and could fight without holding back his power. No one would bat an eye at it. Sylvia was shocked and urgently asked him to stop trying to kill everyone while looking like her. The scene shifted to the Oldton Forest, the designated training area of Goddess Stella Academy. Edward gathered everyone together and outlined the rules of the match. The objective was to take down as many opposing class members as possible. Their uniforms had been specially designed to withstand a single death blow, allowing them to fight at full power. Those who were defeated, whether by losing the match or having their uniform's protection used up, would be considered out. A barrier would appear around them, preventing them from both attacking and being attacked. The first class to eliminate half of the opposing team would be declared the winner. There were 42 students in the Templar class, while the Exorcist class had only 9 students. Edward instructed everyone to take their positions and made it clear that he wouldn't entertain any complaints. Sylvia observed the superior boy among their opponents and remarked that he must have set things up with the instructor earlier, which explained his confidence. Dazel wondered if that were true and noted that humans had a tendency to take indirect approaches. It couldn't be helped, though, likely a way to cover for their lack of power. Sylvia pondered this lack of power and noted that their teams seemed to be in the same situation. Edward then directed the Exorcist class to the east side of the forest, the Templar class to the west, and declared to let's begin the match. Dazel mentioned that he didn't like seeing low morale in his army, but it couldn't be helped. Levirian asked him to wait. Without hesitation, Dazel used his rampage skill, and suddenly his soldiers were filled with a surge of rage. He declared that he had developed an intense thirst to eliminate the Templar class. Sylvia quickly intervened, dispelling Dazel's power by telling him not to use the dark buff skill on their classmates. Dazel then conjured several magic circles, determined to end the match quickly on his own. As he prepared to unleash his Soul Crusher attack, making the magic circle appear in the sky, Leg asked if he was attempting to annihilate everyone. The students were shocked to see the blinding light and wondered what was happening. Sylvia, now gravely concerned, begged Dazel for forgiveness and used the sacred seal of light on him, explaining that he had temporarily sealed Dazel's magic to ensure the safety of the other students. Dazel noted that the sacred seal was an unusual skill, and he could no longer feel the flow of his magic. He could break the seal, but doing so would take too much time. Determined, Dazel rushed forward, deciding to rely on brute force. Sylvia was shocked and pleaded with him to stay still. Meanwhile, a boy from the Templar class was walking through the forest, muttering to himself that he at least needed to defeat one Exorcist student to impress Roland. Suddenly, someone struck him and stole his clothes. The figure donned the Templar uniform and remarked that the human kingdom border was far too easy to cross. It was time to challenge the hero and prove to the noisy Levirian that he was worthy of sitting on the king's throne. The person was none other than the second general of Dazel. A group of Templar students walked together and soon spotted Dazel, though it was actually Sylvia in Dazel's body. She sighed, realizing that she had no choice but to handle things herself before Dazel did anything strange. The boys, thinking it was Dazel, prepared to attack her together. Sylvia quickly apologized, then with a swift motion of her hand, exerted pressure that sent them fleeing in all directions. She marveled at the power of Dazel's body, feeling as though the magic was constantly surging from within. Without proper control, everything around her, even the ground, could easily be destroyed. Edward, watching from a distance, was shocked to see the Templar students falling one by one. He realized that giving the Templar class an advantage had been meaningless in front of Sylvia. Meanwhile, Roland and a boy nearby heard the commotion and wondered what was happening. Roland thought to himself that he had told them to avoid Sylvia and focus on attacking others. The boy, however, corrected him, saying that it wasn't Sylvia causing the trouble, but rather the one who was truly dangerous in that class. The boy with platinum hair, Levirian. The boy then reminded Roland that Levirian had warned him not to even attempt to reveal the Demon King's identity. If he did, that cursed hand would devour him, turning him into a monster before he died. Roland told the boy not to exaggerate things and to focus on defeating the 5 students from the Exorcist class, making sure to avoid Sylvia at all costs. But suddenly, Dazel and Sylvia's body appeared in front of them, remarking that finally he found them too. The boy, clearly frightened, stammered that it wasn't supposed to be a fight and asked if she would let them go peacefully. He pointed out that there were still plenty of Templar students around. When Sylvia didn't respond, the boy added that if she was fine with it, they would leave now. However, just then, the second general appeared in front of Sylvia's body, declaring that he had finally found her and challenging her to a battle. But in reality, it was Dazel, the Demon King himself, who was observing from the shadows, shocked to see Gale standing there. He wondered what he was doing. Gale explained that he had seen the hero walk into their castle wearing the king's armor, and that was reason enough for him to challenge her to a fight, both for fun and to defend the pride of the Demon Kingdom. He rushed to attack her with great intensity, while the boy and Roland attempted to flee. However, they halted near a tree, and Roland wondered what was happening. Gale remarked that, as expected, the hero was impressive and not all weak. Dazel, unsure of what to do, realized that trying to explain the situation to someone like Gale would be pointless, so it was better to play along. As Gale launched another attack, the hero stood firm, and Gale commented that only their king had ever faced his direct strikes. They had never fought in battle before, yet it seemed as though she knew all his moves. Dazel, using his hands to block the attacks, thought to himself that he had already anticipated all of them. Gale, perplexed, wondered why none of his punches were landing. Dazel seized Gale's hand and struck the ground with immense force. Roland, hidden behind the bushes, observed that it was typical of the Templars to act with such courage. He praised Gale's bravery in standing up to the hero and speculated about which family Gale might come from. The boy, deep in thought, concluded that there was no way a monster could be a student. He was certain those horns belonged to a demon. Dazel thought it was incredible. No matter how much he relied on Sylvia's body, her physique and magical energy never seemed to diminish. It was as if she was constantly absorbing the surrounding natural energy and making it her own. This explained how she was able to keep up with him consistently. Perhaps he would try a punch just like Gale, and that would be enough. Gale, getting back on his feet, praised her and mentioned how exciting it was, but he dismissed it as nothing. As he spoke, Azel rushed forward and delivered a punch so powerful that it forced Gale to stumble backward, feeling immense pressure. Even Roland and the other boy could sense the pressure. Gale, however, managed to strike back, breaking apart the mountain with his blow. Meanwhile, inside the academy building, people were wondering if there had been an earthquake as the ground was shaking. Someone mentioned that they had detected a very dense, dark aura in the residential area earlier that morning and wondered what was going on that day. Sylvia, now in Dazel's body, thought to herself that he needed to stop messing around by using her body. Gale stood up, telling the hero that she had truly done it this time. He hadn't expected her power to be so formidable, and if that was the case, he would fight seriously from now on. Dazel told him to go ahead and try. Just then Sylvia, still in Dazel's body, rushed in and shouted for him to stop. She used her hallowed chain to restrain Dazel. Gale smirked and remarked that she had the wrong target. Sylvia demanded that he cut it out. She couldn't let him wreak havoc like this any longer. Dazel insisted that it wasn't him. Gale had been the one to start everything in the first place. Sylvia turned to see Gale running toward them, and he suddenly knelt in front of Dazel's body, apologizing for going against the king's orders by entering the human kingdom. However, he admitted that he had grown bored after the war took hold and had left in order to protect their kingdom from the hero. Sylvia recognized Gale and was shocked to see him there. Gale, with a playful tone, pleaded with her not to take away his good behavior badge, mentioning that Levirian would mock him for an entire week if she did. Sylvia couldn't help but wonder if they were behaving like kindergarten children. At that moment, Levirian appeared, remarking that seeing Gale in such a state was already enough for him. He mentioned that he had been caught in the web as well and had come as soon as he sensed Gale's presence, only to find that his help wasn't needed. Dazel observed that it seemed like Levirian was the one who needed assistance, and he couldn't help but wonder what had happened to him. Levirian, referring to the hero's body as the king, smiled and said he was happy that Dazel was so concerned about him. Gale was stunned to hear Levirian address the hero as king. Levirian then revealed that he had found a way to return both Sylvia and Dazel to their original bodies. They entered a room where Sylvia's friend was waiting to perform the procedure. She prayed to the goddess and all the holy powers of the land above, asking that their light guide all creatures and be a blessing to all living things. Then she used the Soul Divina on both Sylvia and Dazel. After the ritual, they returned to their normal forms. Dazel, amazed, remarked that it had really worked. He noted that although they had not learned holy magic, and were not from the support class or even familiar with simple healing spells, it seemed the hero should have known about it. The girl responded that she was from the support class. Levirian, overcome with emotion, expressed how happy he was that his time being tortured had been of use to his king. However, now that the girl had served her purpose, it was time for him to silence her forever. He couldn't let her jeopardize Dazel's disguise. Sylvia, enraged, was about to act when the girl used a healing spell on Levirian, causing him to collapse. Sylvia muttered that it seemed she wasn't needed after all. Dazel, still observing the scene, found the effect of the healing spell intriguing. As all the students gathered around, Edward announced that they had brought all the injured students into the healing room, and he was pleased to declare that the Exorcist class had unexpectedly won. The students praised Dazel for his efforts, claiming they couldn't believe it was him and not the hero lady. One girl added that Dazel had done everything so Sylvia wouldn't have to move to the Templar class, calling it a sweet gesture. However, the truth was that Sylvia was the one who had done everything, though no one knew this. Roland told the boy that he wasn't sure what had happened. The last thing he remembered was being blown away by a sudden strong wind before he passed out. The boy agreed with this, though he suspected it was a lie. How could he explain that his demon-enhanced strength had allowed him to withstand such a fierce battle? He realized he would need to keep his distance from those demons. Roland approached Dazel and, admitting his loss, stated that as a gentleman, he would honor his birthday by taking Sylvia with him and had a present to give for Dazel's bravery. He placed a hand on Dazel's shoulder, adding that while he might not be of noble birth, Roland would accept him as his bodyguard. Everyone knew that this was a position close to that of a friend. Levirian, furious at Roland's audacity to touch Dazel, was ready to burn him to a crisp. But Dazel, ever calm, told Levirian that it actually sounded good to him. He thought that Roland was well loved by many, and Dazel would certainly gain valuable intelligence from him. He couldn't afford to let that opportunity slip away. Later, back at the Demon Castle, Dazel reflected on his experience. He marveled at how fascinating it was. As he had suspected, Sylvia's body was beyond doubt soft and fragile, a sensation that made it feel like it needed to be protected. Yet when used for battle, it only gave forth remnants of power, thanks to her unique ability. In his 1,700 years of life, Dazel had never encountered anything like this. He wondered if it was the effect of love's power that made it so. Despite the unsettling familiarity he felt, Dazel couldn't quite place where he had met someone like that before. He called for Levirian, and the demon appeared suddenly. Dazael asked him to tell everything he knew about the hero. Levirian thought it was impossible. After all, Dazael had never asked for information on his enemies before, especially since the power gap between them was so vast. Levirian began to wonder if this was part of his king's new approach to defeating the hero. Dazael urged him to do his best to gather all the information on the hero. After some time, Levirian returned with his findings. He explained that ever since Sylvia was born, she had been blessed by the goddess Stella, the deity worshipped by the human race and many others in the Alliance. Because of this blessing, Sylvia possessed a remarkably strong body, unlimited mana, and strength beyond ordinary comprehension. The Holy Church had taken her in at a very young age to teach her the ways of the goddess Stella, keeping her isolated from the tainted outside world. As a result, the pure little girl, radiating holy power, was hailed as a saint. Dazael, curious, mentioned that there was magic footage of the holy girl when she first became a saint. Levirian then played the video, where Sylvia stated that she would chop off the Demon King's limbs, burn them, and scatter the ashes in the deepest sea of the Seven Kingdoms. Levirian was shocked by her words. Dazael, with a hint of disbelief, wondered what kind of charge taught their children such violence. Even in the Demon Kingdom, there were certain principles to uphold. Levirian, however, asked if that was really a concern for Dazael. In the evening, as Sylvia walked with her only friend, she suddenly felt a sharp ache in her chest. Her friend noticed and asked if she had caught a cold, since Sylvia had never been sick in her life. Sylvia replied that the stress of the past few days had taken a toll on her. She explained how difficult it had been to cover up every foolish thing Dazael had done since his arrival. She then thanked her friend for keeping it a secret. Her friend, with a gentle smile, replied that it was nothing compared to what they had done for the kingdom, so don't mention it. Still, the girl couldn't help but wonder why Sylvia had been hiding a couple of demons inside the academy. She chose not to ask, trusting that Sylvia was too straightforward a person to plot anything nefarious with them. After all, Sylvia wouldn't even hold hands with boys. Sylvia, remembering Dazael, smirked and reminded her friend that he did hold his hand recently. She paused for a moment before adding that though, technically, it wasn't really her holding the hand of a boy. Dazael was inside her at the time. The girl blinked in surprise, then chuckled, understanding the context until he was lucky, and if she didn't know the truth, her saintly reputation would be shattered. Sylvia's eyes widened in shock, asked what they were talking about. Once in the Exorcist class, Edward taught the students that demons were an evil, cunning, and aggressive race, born to create chaos. However, the most horrific aspect of them was their habit of consuming their own kind to prolong their lives. Despite the fact that this behavior made them fear sunlight, it forced many demons to remain in their dark territories. Levirian wondered where the teacher had obtained these ideas, and he found it ridiculous how humans viewed them. But as he reflected on it, he realized there was some truth to the description, especially regarding Dazael and his reign. It was clear that humans had a lot to say about him and his trusted right hand, the Demon King's loyal lieutenant. Levirian flipped through the entire book, but noticed that while humans had written extensively about Gale, there was nothing about Lev. This puzzled him, and he wondered why they hadn't written anything about him. Sylvia, sitting ahead of him, explained the reason. Raging Tempest, as Levirian was known, was often seen destroying things, and since he followed his king everywhere, his presence went largely unnoticed. Levirian's emotions were mixed. He felt both angry and proud at the same time. Sylvia urged him to choose one emotion. Meanwhile, Dazael was busy with several pens, writing something with great concentration. Observing him, Levirian thought that Dazael was paying close attention to the lesson, which was to be expected of someone who knew their enemies better than their friends. After a while, Dazael finished writing, thinking that his work should be sufficient. Edward then addressed the students, stating that they should now understand the importance of the demon binding skill. He explained that while demons were incredibly powerful, mastering this skill would give them a chance to defeat even the strongest of demons. Edward mentioned that his scars still stung every time he recalled the moment when he used the skill on the Demon King himself. He added that sometimes the skill could fail if the opponent was too powerful, but he had been fast enough to anticipate the demon's moves, surviving only with his scars as a reminder. Even the Demon King had been impressed with his endurance and had spared his life. Dazael recalled a conversation with Roland about love. When he asked Roland for his thoughts, Roland had replied that it was a foolish question. Roland, a nobleman, handsome, skilled, and outstanding academy student, had said that his mere existence had already captured their affections. Dazael pondered this, realizing that to gain love, he needed to learn how to bind human emotions. He believed that a modified version of the holy binding spell might be the key to achieving this. Edward continued, announcing that he would now select a student to demonstrate the skill with a partner. Dazael stood up and volunteered, saying he would do it. Edward nodded approvingly, wondering who would be chosen as his partner. Levirian, watching the scene unfold, felt uncertain about how things would go. To everyone's surprise, Sylvia stood up to volunteer as Dazael's partner. Both Dazael and Levirian were shocked by this decision. Sylvia, however, thought to herself that someone needed to keep an eye on Dazel, as no one knew exactly what he might do. It was her responsibility to protect the other students. Sylvia stepped in front of Dazel and then used the holy bind on him. Edward, watching the demonstration, remarked that it was splendid as ever, but now it was time to give Dazel the chance to attack. Sylvia was shocked by this, wondering if Edward truly wanted her to die. As Edward prepared to act, she asked him to wait, but he didn't stop. He used the second version of the holy bind, attaching it directly to her heart. Dazel wondered if the spell had failed and what exactly was happening. Suddenly, Sylvia hugged him, asking why he had attacked her so suddenly. She was trembling with fear. To his surprise, she called him darling, and Dazel was stunned by her words. The entire class fell silent. Sylvia called him darling again and moved in to kiss him, but Dazel pushed her back, telling her that the bind had only made her act strangely. Sylvia, now confused, wondered if the spell had failed, but Dazel knew that the holy magic was incredibly difficult to control. Laverian was seething with anger, furious at how Sylvia dared to touch him with those cursed holy hands of hers. He wondered what her plan was. Was she intending to use holy magic when she got close enough only to stab him in the back? But no, perhaps she was planning to self-destruct after grabbing him. A snap echoed in her mind, and she suddenly came to her senses. Dazel realized the effect had worn off. It had only lasted for 10 seconds. Sylvia, now regaining her composure, asked the goddess Stella to forgive her, as she had almost ended his life. Enraged, she charged at him. In that brief moment, Dazel teleported her to his castle. A huge blast shook the surroundings. They then fled into the sky, and Dazel wondered why she was so furious. Perhaps she felt inferior to his skill, and creating manipulation magic was on an entirely different level of difficulty. He mused that 10 seconds might have been too short for her to fully grasp the complexity of the skill. He casually mentioned that he wouldn't mind using that skill on her multiple times. Her face turned bright red, and she called him an idiot and a stupid king. Then she cast a demon dispel barrier on herself, and Dazel wondered what she was doing. She ignored him and instead invoked an even stronger spell, the ultimate demon king dispel barrier. Later, in the cafeteria, Dazel sat with Laverian eating a meal. Laverian remarked that the Kuna Kingdom was primitive in almost every way, but he couldn't deny that their culinary culture was incredibly advanced. The complexity of the flavors was beyond his imagination. Dazel agreed, saying that while human food was good, he still preferred his own Hunt's or Luna's cooking. Two boys approached, excusing themselves and asking if they could sit there. Dazel recognized them both from his class. Laverian, noticing their audacity, wondered how they could possibly think they were worthy enough to sit with his king. However, Dazel simply told them to sit down. Laverian was surprised by his response. Sylvia then entered the cafeteria with her food and saw the four of them sitting together. She approached, excusing herself, and asked if they minded if she sat between Dazel and one of the boys. The boy was visibly surprised to see her there. Sylvia thought to herself that it was dangerous to get too close to demons, but she didn't let it show. The boy, still surprised, asked if Sylvia was jealous, though he was clearly teasing. Sylvia's face turned red, and she hesitated to respond. The boy continued, saying that they had been wanting to thank them personally ever since the time they defeated the Templars. The second boy chimed in, praising their abilities and asking how they managed to defeat all of them alone. As Dazel was about to answer, giving credit to Sylvia, she interrupted him by asking who had taught him how to fight. She added that they had spent a lot of time sparring together. The first boy, now understanding, commented that sparring with Sylvia must have been the reason she was so strong. Laverian, watching the conversation, remarked that Sylvia's movements were silky and Dazel was undeniably strong, a genius who had endured great hardships and trained endlessly. Sylvia, growing a bit impatient, told him to cut the act. She pointed out that the two boys wouldn't understand his games or role-playing. The second boy chuckled, telling Laverian that he was quite funny. He had always wondered why Laverian kept calling Dazel king. Sylvia thought to herself that the group conversation was becoming increasingly tiresome. Just then, Sylvia's friend, Mandarin, arrived, remarking that it was lovely to see Sylvia again and that she had been looking for her. Laverian was startled to see her and immediately asked what she wanted. He warned her that her sneak attacks wouldn't work twice. She replied, saying he was the one who had tried to attack her in the health room. Laverian retorted that her position had practically invited an attack. The first boy commented on the white dress the girl was wearing. The second boy noted that it meant she was of noble birth. The first boy then guessed that Dazel and Laverian must be special. The second boy thought aloud that they likely didn't socialize with commoners. The girl noticed them and spoke up, saying it was a good time and asking if they were from the exorcist class. She mentioned that they must have learned a lot about demons and wondered if they could help her with her Demon King assignment. The first boy responded, saying she had come at the right time. He was about to study a secret manuscript he had received from his grandfather, which contained information passed down from his ancestors. It even included a hand-drawn portrait of the Demon King. The girl was surprised and said she thought all portraits of the Demon King, except those from the Holy Church, had been destroyed. The boy assured her that it was authentic and that he had it safely stored in his magic bag. As the boy checked his magic bag, he was shocked to find that the manuscript was missing. He was certain he had placed it there, but now it was gone. He panicked, unsure of what to do, especially since it was a family heirloom. Levirian, observing the situation, remarked that it was fortunate. The boy, confused, asked how that could be considered fortunate. Later that night, Sylvia was holding the book, examining the portrait. She remarked that it really did look like Dronzer. She was glad she had quickly used her dimension break skill to take the book with her. Now she wondered what the best course of action was for disposing of it safely. After thinking for a moment, she decided that for now she should keep it. After all, it was a historical artifact. Dronzer was reading a book about love. He came across a line that said once one has caught their potential lover in their arms, it was time to make a move. He wondered why he had to bother with stripping someone's armor first. Was love so weak that it couldn't even penetrate a layer of clothing? As Sylvia walked by, she groaned, mentioning that she was sore. Because of Dronzer's strange magic, she had been forced to go back to strengthening her basic defense skills all over again. When she saw him reading, she immediately suspected that he was planning something weird again. Curiosity piqued, she had to see what kind of book he was reading. When she saw the title, she was shocked. Rushing over to him, she told him not to read such a book in the holy ground, calling him a filthy demon. As she prepared to kick him, Dronzer realized he couldn't let her know his next move. In a swift motion, he burned the book. "Stop reading such things in front of me," she demanded. Dronzer thought she had no idea how he had acquired that rare book by sheer luck, and now he had to destroy it. He reminded himself that to understand human love, he had to think like a human. Humans were fond of literature, and surely there must be some information about love out there. But when he had gone to buy the book, he was confronted by a sea of categories like horror, drama, and more. He wondered if they divided knowledge based on emotions, but he couldn't quite understand it. The shopkeeper remarked that Dronzer seemed troubled. Surprised, Dronzer asked how the man knew and if he had reached such a high level of wisdom by reading those books. The shopkeeper agreed and then asked what Dronzer was seeking. When Dronzer mentioned love, the man laughed, telling him he had come to the right place and that he had exactly what Dronzer needed. As the man retrieved the book, Dronzer wondered if it was hidden behind the counter, as it looked like a secret book. The man explained that the book was quite rare, especially in the holy ground area, and that Dronzer must not let anyone know about it. He also warned that the book was very expensive and asked if Dronzer was truly going to buy it. In response, Dronzer piled a huge amount of gold coins onto the counter for the books and prepared to leave. The shopkeeper was shocked by the sight of so much gold. Before Dronzer left, he stopped and began telling Sylvia everything. She responded, telling him that reading such a book would not teach him anything about love. She swore she would never tell him anything about it and insisted that he would never find anything of value in that book. However, she was concerned that he would continue to keep such a book. Shocked, Dronzer burned all the books and wondered where the general had gone, the one who usually lingered around. Sylvia asked if they were planning to do anything strange again. Dronzer replied that Levirian had some business that needed to be handled with his human intelligence, and that it was something that could only be paid for privately. Sylvia was taken aback by this and referred to all demons as the same scum, accusing them of tempting humans in a very dirty way. Dronzer clarified that it was with one of her friends. Sylvia, furious upon hearing this, rushed forward at lightning speed, shouting that she was going to kill Dronzer twice. Dronzer thought that Levirian only wanted to give him some gems, and he wondered if gems from the Demon Kingdom were illegal. Just then, the boy with the cursed hand arrived to report to Dronzer. He knelt and said that, as Dronzer had requested, he had taken care of all the necessary preparations and had made the general officially one of the academy's students. Other students watched in awe as the nobleman addressed Dronzer as king and even knelt before him. The boy continued, asking if there was anything else he needed to do or if he could leave. Dronzer mentioned there was one more thing. He was looking for some human advice. He added that the boy was mostly human as well. The boy was taken aback by the mostly part. Dronzer then asked him about love. With a shocked expression, the boy asked if Dronzer meant dating. Dronzer, curious, asked him to explain what dating was. The boy explained that dating was when someone spent time trying to impress a woman, and they had to have someone they wanted to impress. Dronzer, still confused, wondered if it was about showing power, thinking it was like a battle. If that was the case, he concluded there could only be one person who could be his opponent. And so, he decided, he would ask the hero out on a date. The boy was shocked to hear this. In the classroom, Edward was teaching, reminding the students that their god had once warned them about a day when the strongest demon king would be born, one who would destroy the land until nothing was left. Smoke rose from Dronzer and Levirian, causing the other students to wonder about it. Dronzer, deep in thought, was planning to ask for a date, but he knew Sylvia would surely decline the challenge. He realized he had no choice but to make her indebted to him before he could ask her. Edward advised the class not to let their guards down. Before the class began, Dazel and Levirian had arrived early. Levirian mentioned this and told Dazel not to wait for the humans, but rather let them wait for him. Just as they were talking, Philo was seen lying there. He apologized, asking them to give him a few minutes. She assured them she wouldn't get involved in their game, but she had to finish her quest no matter what. Dazel wondered if this was what adventurers did. Levirian explained that since the church had opened the academy, most of the quests from the human kingdom guilds were now taken and managed by the academy, giving students the opportunity to work on them. Most students, Levirian added, did quests for that useless metal they called gold. Curious, Dazel took out a huge pile of gold coins in the classroom, which left Philo shocked. Levirian commented that the gold could give her some much-needed rest. Philo, still stunned, replied that there was so much gold they could even buy land with it. Just then, Sylvia approached Dazel, asking where he had gotten all that gold. She sweetly thought that he didn't have any, which was why he ended up in the commoner class. He explained that he had sold those rare purple gems to a man. Sylvia, shocked, asked how it was even possible, as the gems could only be found in the deepest part of the demon kingdom, and the man had been willing to give everything he had for them. Sylvia quickly realized that Dazel had given his classmate black market gold and demanded to know if he was trying to get him killed by the church. Dazel wondered why the church banned it. She replied that the weapons imbued with those gems were incredibly powerful, able to counter both dark and light magic, and the church didn't want such weapons around. He remarked that in the demon kingdom, kids used those gems to practice magic. The next day, Sylvia stood in front of the quest board, wondering if she should take a quest. Dazel, noticing her excitement, asked why she was so eager, as though she had never seen a quest board before. She asked what he meant, suggesting it might be his first time seeing one. He denied it, explaining that he didn't usually take quests, but as an adventurer in the past, he knew that other races had quest boards too. Sylvia was surprised. She had never heard about that part of his past. The church always depicted him as a sadistic and cruel king, and hearing about his normal past made him seem more human to her. Edward then called out to the students, instructing them to get outside. As the students gathered, Edward gave them a lecture, explaining that working on quests earned them points, which were used to determine their rank. This was also required for their promotion to D class. However, he noticed that some of them had never worked on a single quest since enrolling at the academy. He reassured them that they didn't need to worry, as in the next few days, first-year students would have the chance to work on their field assignments. He hoped they would make the best use of their time, and since it was their first time, he suggested they form a party to go on a quest together. Sylvia was shocked upon hearing this and wondered if she would really have to form a party with a demon king. It felt like a joke to her. Her first quest should have been a precious memory, but now she was being asked to babysit these two. She realized that if she left the academy grounds, she wouldn't be able to keep an eye on them, and who knew what trouble they could get into in town? That left her with no other choice but to agree. Reluctantly, she approached them and said to let's form a party. Levirian wondered aloud who would be interested, and Dazel responded to let's do it, but on one condition. Sylvia raised an eyebrow by asking what condition. Dazel smiled and asked if she wanted to accept my better invitation. Sylvia, remembering all the battles they had fought together in the past, agreed to his proposal. Dazel grinned happily, pleased that his attempt at calling a battle a date was understood. He was glad that the hero got it. Sylvia couldn't help but wonder why he was so excited. As they stepped out of the academy, Sylvia noticed Levirian was with them and remarked that she had guessed he wasn't going to join. Levirian responded with a playful smile, saying it was a silly question. He would forever be in the same party as his king. He then flew away, leaving Sylvia with little to say. Sylvia, thinking about their party composition, mentioned that they would need a healer from the priest class. Levirian, however, dismissed her assumption, stating that their regeneration skills didn't require a healer. Sylvia then brought up Renata, her friend, and said she would join their party as the healer. Levirian raised an eyebrow, suggesting that Renata would do more harm than good in the party. Sylvia shrugged, acknowledging that he had a point. As they walked, Philo suddenly approached them, calling for them to wait. He asked if he could join their party as well. After seeing that their quest was taking them to Mona's town, his hometown, he offered to help them along the way. Sylvia agreed, and Philo happily announced that he had already prepared supplies for their 3-day trip. Levirian, somewhat perplexed, wondered who had told them they were embarking on a trip. Before anyone could answer, Dazel used his powers to make them all disappear from their current location. They arrived in front of Mona's town, which left Philo in awe. She exclaimed how amazing it looked, but both she and Renata began feeling nauseous. They quickly found somewhere to relieve themselves. Dazel, amused, mentioned that it was his first time bringing ordinary humans along with his teleportation, and it turned out there were side effects, which he found fascinating. Sylvia scolded him, telling him not to do anything dangerous like that to her friends. Dazel shrugged and pointed out that he had brought her along and she was fine. Sylvia countered, saying that it was because she had trained herself to resist his magic. He then remarked that from now on he wouldn't take anyone with him except her. Sylvia wondered aloud who would want to go anywhere with him, and told him not to say things like that, as others might misinterpret it. Dazzle pondered her words, unsure if it was really such a big deal. Renata, still processing everything, wondered what had happened and who they truly were. She was curious about how they were able to perform such powerful magic. Laverian, in a dismissive tone, referred to her as the weak one, claiming she wasn't worthy of being acknowledged by Dazzle. In retaliation, Renata used an area healing spell on him, causing him pain. She asked if he was alright or if he wanted her to heal him further. Afterward, Laverian vomited, clearly unprepared for the effects of the spell. As they continued walking, Sylvia asked Dazzle how he knew about the location of Mana's town. He casually replied that he had visited the place some time ago. She mentioned that she had never heard of the Demon King visiting a human kingdom. Philo, impressed, turned to Sylvia and asked what kind of magic she had used to transport them in the blink of an eye. Laverian, irritated, scoffed at their assumption that Dazzle's skill was Sylvia's and asked if they even understood that ancient teleportation magic required meticulous calculations. Sylvia interrupted him with a smirk, firmly stating that it was her skill and asking Laverian to stop joking. The three of them continued ahead, while Sylvia stayed back with Dazzle. She told him that if he used any magic at all while they were working on the quest, she would go all out in their battle the next day. She then moved forward, leaving him to wonder if she was excited. He knew that a warrior like her would understand if he called it a battle rather than a date. He resolved to uphold his part of their agreement to the best of his ability. They soon encountered a man who thanked them for accepting his request. He explained that a large number of monsters were approaching their town, and the Lord's Knights didn't deal with smaller threats like these. Sylvia immediately pulled out a pen and paper, asking him to provide details about the types of monsters that usually came. When the old man mentioned giant rats, Dazzle, without her noticing, dealt with them swiftly by defeating them. Meanwhile, Sylvia continued writing the monsters' names, unaware of Dazzle's actions behind her. The same sequence unfolded with the grass arachnids and the red bats. After she finished writing the names of the monsters, she intended to leave it to them to handle the task. However, Dazzle casually mentioned that it was already done. Sylvia's anger flared as she asked why he kept ruining her exciting first quest experience. He calmly replied that he had helped her finish the quest. Sylvia, clearly upset, told him that it was unacceptable and that she would continue working on the quest regardless. She then summoned more monsters, but the old man intervened, telling her that it was enough and that there was no need to make them extinct. Feeling disheartened, Sylvia sighed and said that it felt pointless now. Excitement had vanished and it no longer felt like a quest. She bitterly realized how foolish she had been to think she could have a normal experience with him around. The old man, seeing her distress, reassured her that she had done a marvelous job and that they were truly grateful. He explained that it was rare to find adventurers willing to take on a quest with so little reward, and they sincerely thanked her for her efforts. Sylvia responded modestly, telling him not to mention it. Laverian, with a dismissive tone, told the old man that they were forced to take such a lowly quest, and that he should be thankful to Dazzle for stepping in to help. Sylvia, growing more irritated, punched Laverian and turned to the old man, explaining that it was their first quest, which was why they chose to do it. The old man nodded and mentioned that he had heard they were from the Holy Church's academy. He added that quests were typically divided between the city guilds and the academy. Sylvia replied that regardless of the division, they still had to go to the guild to officially complete the mission. Laverian suddenly stood up and knelt before Dazzle, asking for permission to contribute to the success of Dazzle's first Human Academy quest. Dazzle agreed and Sylvia was shocked by his request. As Laverian hurried off, Sylvia turned to Renata, asking her to keep an eye on him. Renata agreed without hesitation. Philo, looking excited, announced that he had some business to attend to and would be leaving before they returned to the academy. Sylvia nodded in understanding, knowing that Philo was from the area. Dazzle then turned to Sylvia and remarked that it would be just the two of them now. She agreed, and he added that since the quest had gone well, he was hoping she would keep her promise and go on a date with him. Sylvia, caught off guard, looked at him in surprise and asked if he just mentioned a date. The scene shifts to a strange and desolate place where a ruined building stands. A girl, her face hidden by a dark overcoat, stands quietly, reflecting that it was about time they stopped celebrating. It had been a month since the war on the Demon Continent, yet there was still no sign of the Demon King. Many people gathered nearby, listening to her words. She continued, stating that all the kingdoms of the other 6 races had withdrawn from the battlefield. The hero's party had also disbanded and returned to their respective kingdoms. Now only Sylvia remained in the human kingdom, and it could be the perfect time for them to capture her. Turning to her queen, she relayed the latest information, explaining that Sylvia was currently at the Goddess Stella Academy. She noted that Sylvia was so powerful that she could even hold her own against the Demon King. While the hero's power had yet to fully awaken, facing the generals of the Demon Kingdom, who had already reached their full potential, was a more challenging task. This, she believed, was their opportunity. The queen, listening carefully, acknowledged that the girl was indeed strong enough to confront the hero at present. However, she advised caution in dealing with her. The queen then entrusted the task to 11. 11, standing at attention, agreed to the queen's command without hesitation. The scene shifts to the academy where Sticia tells Sylvia that it's already enough, but Sylvia glares at her, replying firmly that it's not enough. They were currently focused on healing Dazel, Liverian, and Philo. Sylvia insists that the victim was on the verge of death, so they must do their best to heal him. She asks Sticia not to lose hope. Sticia responds, explaining that the situation wasn't unfolding as they hoped. Dazel, his voice weak, calls out for Sylvia to come closer. She responds sternly that the dying shouldn't be talking. He asks why she hadn't come to their date the day before. Sylvia, taken aback, blushes at his words, and Sticia, misunderstanding the situation, looks between them in confusion. Sylvia's anger flares as she snaps, telling him that no one had agreed to go on a date with him. In frustration, she uses a light attack on him. Sticia, startled, intervenes, saying it was not a healing skill and urging Sylvia to stop and start again. Sylvia, unfazed, assures her that there's no need to worry. It wasn't a typical healing skill. It was the fire of purification, which was far more effective than regular healing magic. Even Renata could use it. Renata, indeed, was using level 7 healing magic, the Light of Clemency, to send Liverian fleeing into the sky in terror. He screamed for Dazel as he struggled. After some time, Liverian collapsed onto the ground. Sticia, observing the situation, suggests that whatever issues were between Sylvia and Dazel, she should listen to what Dazel has to say first. Sticia was certain that their problems could be resolved with a calm conversation. Sylvia, feeling a mix of emotions, realizes that Sticia might be blindly idealizing the situation. The holiness of the priest-class students truly seemed to be on another level. Sylvia reluctantly agreed to talk, wondering how he could possibly think she wanted to go on a date with him. All he had done was ruin her highly anticipated first school experience since arriving at the academy. When Dazel remarked that it seemed like she was enjoying herself, Sylvia immediately denied it. He reminded her that she had promised to go on a date with him, and he had agreed to be in the same party as her, helping her complete the quest. She had also agreed to battle alongside him. That was what a date was, he claimed. Sylvia, still confused, wondered aloud if that was really what a date was. Dazel, in response, explained that a date was a time to impress someone, and there was no better way to do so than by showing superiority in battle. Shocked, Sylvia immediately told him that wasn't what a date was like at all. Sticia, watching the exchange, struggled to contain her laughter. Sylvia, trying to clarify, explained that a date was more about enjoying time together, walking around the city, eating together, and simply having fun. She admitted, somewhat sheepishly, that she'd never actually gone on a date herself. But she didn't think that was too strange. After all, she had always been focused on her duties. Sticia, with a playful smile, suggested that perhaps this could be a good opportunity for both of them to go on a date together. She believed they could learn a thing or two from the experience. Just as Sylvia was about to respond, a lady instructor arrived, cutting their conversation short. She declared that practice was over and commended the Exorcist class students for being able to use basic healing skills for first aid. Although some students seemed to prefer the advanced skills, it was important to keep in mind that healing magic was not perfect. Dazel sensed something unusual and instructed Sylvia to be prepared to cast a barrier for the students as something was about to happen. Shivansh was unsure of what Dazel was referring to, but soon realized that his demon eyes had activated. Using his eyes, he scanned the city and discovered a group of people approaching the bridge. Among them was 11. She commanded the others to attack and capture Sylvia. Sylvia was left in shock upon seeing them. Everyone was shocked to see the girls, and then a sinister figure used her power to create an explosion that was massive. As the smoke cleared, she locked onto her target, Sylvia. Just as she was about to cast her magic, Dazel intervened, using the soul prison to halt her. The girl was taken aback and wondered why her magic didn't pierce through, but instead it froze at her core. She was astonished at how a student from the academy could perform such a high-level skill. Meanwhile, Sticia, Renata, Sylvia, and all the other students were covered by a protective light spell. The villainess saw the hero and, in desperation, broke her magic to escape, fleeing into the distance. Sylvia was left stunned by this turn of events. Renata, confused, asked Sylvia what was happening. Sylvia replied that someone suddenly attacked the academy, but thank God we're safe. The lady instructor instructed the students to evacuate immediately. Renata turned to Sylvia and said that it was all thanks to her barrier, but she had left one person behind. Sylvia looked around and realized she had forgotten Liverian, who was now injured. The building was on fire, and 11 had cast an enormous magic circle over the academy, trapping them all in a powerful barrier. As Sylvia realized it was a dark element barrier, Dazel, who was preparing to leave, mentioned he was going. Sylvia rushed to stop him, demanding that he tell her which demon he had ordered to attack the academy. Angrily, she told him she couldn't let him go until he confessed. She attacked him, shouting that she knew the barrier and the attackers were all dark element skills. Only demons were capable of using such high-level dark magic. Levirian, enraged, stepped forward to protect Dazzle, shouting at Sylvia to get her hands off his king. Sylvia retorted that he didn't have the right to order her around. Levirian shot back, saying it was her who dared to threaten his king. Dazzle, remaining calm, interjected, telling them there wasn't much time. He then explained to Sylvia that he had nothing to gain from destroying the academy. Levirian agreed with this statement, adding that if it were up to him, he could have easily flattened the entire academy and the whole city without breaking a sweat. Dazzle clarified that Levirian wasn't helping him, like his point was that Sylvia needed to trust him and understand that he had nothing to do with the attack. Just then, an announcement echoed, declaring that the resistance should stop. They revealed they were from the Demon King's army and had taken control of the academy. Dazzle and Levirian were both shocked by this revelation. Sylvia, enraged, declared she knew it and a demon will always be a demon, but Dazzle quickly responded that it was not what this looks like. The enemy girls were locked in battle with the noble students of the Templar class who had been tasked with holding off the attackers. It was their duty to defend the sacred ground from the demons. Edward, injured and lying on the ground, lied to his comrades, claiming he had no idea why his magic wasn't working against the demons. Perhaps, he said, this was the end of his legendary tale. Roland urged him to hold on, but Edward, resigning himself, entrusted everything to Roland and asked him to make sure the church knew of his valor. With his last breath, Edward died and Roland rushed to his side, begging him not to go. A girl, watching from a distance, thought that Edward had passed away from a mere graze to his head, a result of his poor landing. She questioned whether Edward had truly been an instructor. As she overheard the voices of her fellow students wondering who needed help, she turned to find them all lying defeated. As the others spoke in despair, it became clear that they were being overwhelmed. The girl wondered who could be responsible for this. Then she noticed Dazzle moving at an astonishing speed behind her. Using her powers, she saw two individuals finishing off their troops with lightning speed, all while arguing with each other. She couldn't decide if they were heroes or monsters. Sylvia, furious, confronted Dazzle, shouting why he was still following her. He replied that he was helping her and pointed out that they didn't know if all of them were skilled in spell magic. She had no choice but to defeat them one by one using brute force, which would take time if done alone. The students of the Templar class began to retreat, calling out that the hero had saved them once again. Sylvia turned to Dazzle, incredulous, telling him how unbelievable he was. She accused him of not being able to use demonize or telepathy to contact his generals, yet now he was helping her. Enraged, she shouted at him to stop lying and get out of her way. Suddenly, Dazzle felt the overwhelming presence of holy power. Its pressure was immense. All the enemy girls were defeated, and Dazzle, with a hint of admiration, asked Sylvia if she was able to handle even the anomaly inside the barrier. As expected of a hero, he remarked. Sylvia wondered aloud who would do such a foolish thing and declared she wasn't a child. Nearby, a lady was listening to their conversation from her hiding spot. Suddenly, Yahello arrived, striking down the girls and sending them flying. The students from Dadar cheered him on, praising him for being among the best in the academy. They confidently said that Roland would surely acknowledge him as one of his subordinates. They urged Gale to defeat them all. Gale, humbly thanking them, replied, "It's nothing really," but it was his first time being praised by a human. He saw the light coming from Sylvia, and in a fit of anger, she grabbed Dazzle by the collar, demanding to know when he had allowed another general to enter the academy. Dazzle replied that it had been some time and explained that Gale, feeling bored, had requested that Dazzle enroll him. Gale, trying to calm Sylvia down, insisted that they had no involvement in the situation and that he had dealt with all the wrongdoers on that side. Dazzle, intrigued, asked if that included the leader, the one with the number on her back. Gale was curious about whom Dazzle was referring to. It was Elvin, and she stood before Levirian, remarking on how bold it was for someone to play the hero by protecting the students hiding in the church. She admitted that she liked the youthful human voice because they always believed they could accomplish anything. Then she asked, "Shall we begin now?" Inside the building, Stacia and a few others were working urgently to heal a wounded. Stacia, with bandages in hand, marveled at the situation. She wondered, wasn't this a miracle? And ever since the evacuation, none of the enemies had been able to breach the church's defenses. Another person mentioned that it was the protection of the goddess and urged everyone to pray louder to Goddess Stella. Meanwhile, Levirian, visibly frustrated, stood outside, guarding them all. He seethed, thinking to himself that those humans had no idea he had defeated every enemy that had tried to break through. If it weren't for his king's orders, he would have handed these ungrateful wretches over to the enemy rather than protect them. He considered the possibility of doing just that once he had fulfilled his duties. After all, the order was only to protect them temporarily. Dazzle had never said anything about protecting them forever. Eleven, meanwhile, commented on Levirian's actions. She said he was playing the hero by guarding the students hiding in the church. and that was one of the reasons she liked the youthful human voice. They always believed they could do anything. Laverian, growing annoyed by her words, thought to himself that she was far too talkative. Perhaps he should scare her a little. He used his power, attempting to intimidate her. "How foolish to look down on me," he sneered, his voice dark and filled with menace. And he wasn't a mere hero, but the first general of the demons. Laverian wondered if he was the new hero candidate and whether the church had secretly created such a program. It made sense that they would have the hero enroll in the Holy Church Academy, but it couldn't be ignored. Laverian, growing impatient, asked her to don't ignore him. He continued, his tone darkening, that if this was how she wanted to approach it, then don't blame me for taking it seriously, and with that, he unleashed a powerful blue beam of light. Shocked, she gasped that even if he were a hero candidate, it's impossible for a student to produce magic of such magnitude. The beam hit her, but she quickly regained her composure and said, magic was still just magic. Every spell could be broken. She then dispelled the beam with a swift incantation. Before she could react further, Laverian appeared at her side and asked if she think he didn't know that. He attacked again, but she narrowly dodged by fleeing. As she looked back, she saw him closing the distance once more. He smirked and taunted her if she thinks she could escape, but she was not fast enough to dispel his magic. She retorted that it was dumb to think dispelling was all she was good at, and as she prepared to counterattack, Laverian moved closer and mocked that he knew that's all she was good for. He then referred to her dismissively as a bonehead. Unfazed, she quipped that it was a bit harsh for a hero candidate, but just by looking at his magic, she could tell her might not win against him. Then, aiming toward the academy, she said that now that she knows his weakness, let's see how he fare while trying to protect those people. Laverian laughed and asked if she wanted to blow them up, so how about becoming his VIP guest instead? She raised an eyebrow, wondering what kind of hero he really was. Without answering, she released another attack aimed at the academy, declaring that she will still blow them up. Laverian recalled Dazel's words. He wanted me to protect the church and the humans who had evacuated there. If he failed in that, Dazel and Gale will be the ones to carry out the human kingdom infiltration mission. There was no time for hesitation. Laverian rushed to intercept her attack, realizing he couldn't waste time with spells. Instead, he took the full brunt of the attack, absorbing the hit himself. The explosion was massive, creating a huge blast at the impact point. As Dazel and Sylvia arrived, they saw Laverian standing there, a huge hole in his chest from the blast. As they observed Laverian in such a state, Sylvia, who knew him well, remarked that he was the greatest magic user, second only to the Demon King himself. She wondered what kind of enemy could have caused such a drastic change. Her anger flared as she thought about how she could not afford to let her god down. The girl continued, noting that if the hero of the human kingdom was not involved, how could it be that the next hero was struck with a fatal wound to the chest? Such a noble boy was sacrificing himself to protect the weak. Sylvia, perplexed, wondered who the girl was referring to, while Laverian, in contrast, seemed more like a war criminal. 11, overhearing the conversation, chuckled and said it was as expected, commenting that her joke had been quite effective. Sylvia, undeterred, made it clear that whatever 11's purpose was, she would not allow any demand to set foot in her domain. She thought about it for a moment, guessing that only a few specific demons could pose a real threat. 11, however, expressed her expectation that Sylvia herself was no different. Sylvia, recalling what her queen had told her, realized that the hero's powers had yet to fully awaken. She would rather face an unawakened hero than confront the Demon King or his generals. Those beings were her worst nightmare. Nevertheless, Sylvia decided she would give them one last chance to surrender. If they didn't want to meet the same fate as Laverian, they had the opportunity to back down now. By standing there, she declared that she would not end up a sobbing wreck like Laverian, no matter what 11 had in store for them. 11 was shocked to see that Laverian was still alive. Tears streamed down his face as he begged Dazel for forgiveness, feeling he had brought disgrace upon him. Whatever punishment awaited him, Laverian vowed to endure it 100 times over. But then, as if trying to atone for his failure, he suddenly declared that he would accept it 1,000 times as long as Dazel continued to keep him in service. He swore to make his armor 100 times stronger and promised never to lower his guard again. 11 stood in disbelief, shocked by the sight. With such grievous damage, she was certain he was beyond saving. She wondered what was happening in this place. Her troops had been defeated, and unbelievably strong students kept appearing. Now there was even a boy who wouldn't die despite a hole in his chest. She had been feeling a strange, dangerous sensation ever since arriving at the academy, but she had assumed it was simply due to the presence of the hero. She then declared that she had no idea what kind of trick they had used, but now that the hero was here, she had no reason to engage with mere academy students. She ordered them to leave if they didn't want to get hurt. Dazel, however, corrected her. He explained that it wasn't a trick, but rather the intriguing effect of a unique dispel that had converted her seemingly simple attack. This dispel had been powerful enough to shatter Laverian's unbreakable dragon mana armor, which was specifically designed to counter ancient magic. Although his armor had been destroyed, one of his hearts remained intact. To truly defeat him, they would need to find the hidden heart, which was somewhere within his body. Sylvia was writing in her notebook, noting that it was valuable insight for the kingdom. She remarked that it seemed rather unfair that a dragon's heart could be split into 10 pieces. Meanwhile, Levirian was crying and telling Dazael that he had just revealed his life's secret to the enemy. If that was his punishment, he would accept it. 11 thought the situation was growing stranger by the minute. A smirk spread across her face as she reflected on the mana armor, ancient magic, and dragon hearts. She wondered how these brats dare mess around in front of her. In that moment, she decided to change her mind. She would end them all right there. Just then, Stacia appeared outside. She noticed the sudden silence and wondered if the battle had ended, hoping that Sylvia and the others were all right. The 11 saw her and realized she was the one her queen had mentioned. She felt fortunate to have found her. Without hesitation, she captured Stacia and began to flee. She muttered to herself that she had changed her mind. There was no use in playing games with humans. They weren't worth her time. As she jumped to leave, she thought about the strange events unfolding around her. At least she had acquired a target, which would please her queen. But suddenly, she felt an overwhelming pressure from the magic mana. Fear surged through her and she stumbled backward, realizing that she was still alive. She wondered what had just happened, feeling as if she had been eviscerated for a brief moment. Then she saw Dazael filled with rage. She wondered if that was his killing intent. Sylvia realized that if Dazael were to unleash his true aura, it would likely have devastating effects on the entire area. But to her surprise, she noticed that he had focused his aura solely on their enemies, exhibiting extraordinary control. What amazed her even more was how effortless he seemed while doing it. She couldn't help but feel foolish for ever thinking she could protect everyone in the kingdom, knowing now that their survival depended entirely on his mercy. Levirian began to cry, exclaiming that at last, those mongrels would witness the true power of Dazael. Meanwhile, Dazael called out to Gale, who was busy defeating the other hostile women. Sylvia noticed someone in the group 11, wondering who Gale was. Without hesitation, Gale rushed forward and knelt before Dazael, asking if he had been summoned. He eagerly offered to eliminate the trash who dared defy Dazael. Sylvia, still caught up in her thoughts, wondered about the raging tempest she felt within herself. At that moment, Ranita arrived, concerned about Statia's well-being. Stacia expressed her gratitude to Sylvia for her assistance. As Ranita turned her attention to Gale, she studied him carefully and asked if he was the infamous demon general. Gale, with a slight smirk, confirmed it. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Levirian transformed into his demon form as well. He declared with pride that he too was at Dazael's service. With a confident sneer, he turned to Gale and announced that there was nothing Gale could do that he himself couldn't. Levirian then urged Dazael to give him orders as well. Renata, still puzzled, asked who Levirian was. Irritated by her ignorance, Levirian snapped that he was the first general, making it clear that his position and power were second only to Dazael. 11 was shocked to see both the first and second Demon King generals standing before her, and she began to sweat profusely. Dazael informed her that her barrier's mana prevented him from using any time and space-related skills, including his purgatory magic. However, he needed to use it now, so he instructed them both to cast their own barriers to negate the enemies. He also emphasized that no one could get hurt during this or Sylvia would kick them out. Both Levirian and Gale agreed, and Levirian told the humans to step back as they were obstructing his way. Upon hearing his voice, Ranita immediately recognized it as Levirian's. Levirian asked if she had just realized that. Then he and Gale combined their power to cast a barrier, which surprised 11. She marveled at the high-quality magic, noticing it took an unorthodox shape. It seemed like a complex series of enhancement spells woven together. Levirian turned to Gale and sarcastically asked if he could even call it a barrier, claiming that even children could perform better than him. 11, still unsure, wondered if it was really just a barrier. Gale admitted that he wasn't particularly skilled at casting barriers. Levirian, feeling a sense of pride, teased Gale, calling him a fool for never practicing his magic, and wondered aloud how such a weak magician had managed to become a general. Finally, Dazael was free to attack 11 and observe how her unique dispel would work. 11, now deeply alarmed, realized that both generals were bowing at Dazael. This revelation only confirmed the intense killing intent she had felt. At that moment, someone told her not to worry. It was her turn now. 11 was overwhelmed by the situation. It felt insane to her, and she couldn't understand what everyone was doing there. She knew she could never defeat them, so her only option was to run. But her legs refused to move. Dazael used his power to strike at her, and she could feel the dense magic building up. She wondered how she could possibly nullify it, feeling deep regret for her queen. Just as the attack was about to hit, Sylvia intervened, causing the magic to collide with her barrier. She glared at Dazael and asked who had given him permission to rampage, especially by throwing a deadly beam inside the academy. She warned him that if anyone got hurt because of him, she would make sure he was expelled, and he would have no chance to learn anything there. Dazael calmly told her not to interfere. Levirian, enraged, turned to Sylvia, demanding to know how she dared to strike at his king from behind. Dazzle reassured him that it was fine and that he would use his bare fists instead of magic. Sylvia, seething, muttered that she had thought the enemy was already finished. Suddenly, a woman appeared, and for a moment, Sylvia believed that Dazzle was about to deliver a fatal blow. She wondered who the woman was as her entire aura had shifted. As she studied the newcomer, Sylvia realized that the woman wasn't a demon. Her ears were unlike anything Sylvia had ever seen, and she couldn't place her race. Stasha spoke up, explaining that the woman was a Nephilim. Sylvia, stunned, recalled the ancient race of half-human, half-angel beings, wondering aloud if they hadn't already gone extinct. The woman revealed that Dazzle had planted a remarkable time and space spell on his body, capable of reversing any damage done to it. She guessed that her child no longer had a chance of hiding their identities. If the demon lord was willing to go as far as killing and resurrecting someone repeatedly, and even torturing her to extract information, then their situation was dire. Sylvia thought about Dazzle's true intentions. She realized that instead of simply defeating the enemy, he seemed more interested in provoking her innocence, perhaps to test her. The realization filled her with shame for ever accusing him, and she considered apologizing later, feeling it was something she had to do. Dazzle, however, reflected on his actions. He had used the repeated deaths and resurrections to gauge the limits of her strange dispel ability. It had been a long time since he had been interested in anyone's skills beyond the hero's mysterious love power. He then called out to Levirian, asking if he had analyzed the dispel skill in the most detailed manner. Levirian confirmed, stating that as long as he could cast his spell directly on her body, he would be able to do so. All he had to do was capture her alive. The woman, hearing this, muttered that at least Dazzle was showing some concern. Then, in an instant, she disappeared, followed by a massive blast. The woman thought she had been disintegrated before her attack even landed. Her body was gradually vanishing. But then she staggered back, realizing that the speed at which Dazzle activated his time and space magic was beyond comprehension. She couldn't understand how he kept activating it without even moving a muscle. Levirian explained that Dazzle's power was immense, even in his normal state. His magical aura was so potent that it was untouchable by everyone except the hero and destructive to all his enemies. None of them would survive his wrath. In response, Sylvia launched a blast at Levirian's face, furiously calling him stupid. She demanded to know which part of not using magic he didn't understand. She warned him that if he did it again, she was done letting him have his way. Dazzle, unfazed, thought to himself that if he reduced his magic to just 0.001%, it would be safe. He then turned his attention to the girl, asking her about the counterattack. As he punched, Sylvia cried out in confusion, questioning what he was doing. Levirian, however, expressed his admiration for Dazzle, acknowledging the precision of his actions. Despite that, the sheer magnitude of Dazzle's power was so overwhelming that all the students were packed into the barrier for protection. One boy, feeling the pressure, thought that keeping the barrier intact might be even more dangerous than letting it break. Suddenly, a massive blast erupted, shattering the barrier and sending it spiraling toward the mountains. Lucia stood firm, determined to protect the lady, insisting that it was her duty as a member of the hero party. She couldn't allow the saint to fight alone. Knights appeared, urging Lucia to stop. They acknowledged that she might be the strongest paladin in the kingdom, but even the combined forces of the mages and knights had been unable to scratch the unique barrier the demon lady had put up. Lucia replied that she knew the challenge, but just then, they all witnessed a massive blast strike the barrier, shattering it entirely. Sylvia commented on the destruction of the academy grounds. As the demon lady fell, Levirian remarked that despite taking a direct hit from the hero's holy fire, his side of the barrier had withstood the attack much better than hers. Renata, watching the scene unfold, thought to herself that Levirian certainly had a lot to say. Dazzle descended from the sky, declaring that it was all over. Sylvia, feeling the weight of the situation, murmured that her career as the kingdom's hero was finished. Dazzle reassured her, stating that no one had been harmed, so there was no need for her to worry. The demon lady slowly rose to her feet, marveling at Dazzle's power. She noted that even their regular punches contained such harmful mana capable of destroying a body down to its very cells. If not for his time and space magic, there would have been nothing left of her. She admitted that she truly hadn't stood a chance against him. As her clothes were completely burned off, Renata, with a somber expression, closed her eyes, her gaze falling on Levirian. The lady, her voice weak but resolute, whispered that she had bought enough time. Dazzle wondered what the demon lady had meant by her last words. Lucia approached Sylvia, asking if she was okay. Sylvia, still taking in the situation, noticed the royal guards arriving swiftly and wondered how they had gotten there so fast. She then instructed the others to blend in and act as students. Dazzle, Levirian, and Gale reverted to their normal appearances. Lucia, still trying to understand, asked about the situation and if Sylvia had managed to apprehend the perpetrators. Sylvia nodded, confirming that she was currently helping the students. Dazel then approached, acting unusually formal, thanking the hero for saving him. Sylvia found his tone unsettling, feeling that his words didn't sound natural at all. Laverian, clearly frustrated, kicked Gale and remarked that while Gale might be a weak human, he was still better than him. Sylvia thought to herself that Laverian wasn't even trying to hide his irritation. Renata and Laverian then excused themselves, heading off to assist the others. Lucia, using her eye power, immediately shouted the name of the Demon King. She then rushed toward Laverian, accusing him of thinking his perfect disguise could fool her eyes. She sensed the dark, malicious aura that only a demon could possess and declared that he dared not stand so close to Sylvia. Sylvia, reflecting on the situation, realized it wasn't their poor acting that had given them away. Laverian, with a smirk, explained to Lucia that she was intentionally targeting him, even while shouting the name of the Demon King. He wasn't surprised. He was there to defend his king. Lucia, undeterred, replied that only the wise truly understood their own power. She believed that the only one who stood a chance against the Demon King was the hero, so she had aimed for the weakest link. Laverian, with a raised eyebrow, asked that whom she called the weakest. Lucia pointed at him, declaring that he was the demon who could only use magic. Laverian, unfazed, responded that such an assumption was a mistake. As the first general, his strength went beyond just magic. He advised her to target Gale instead, as he was the weakest among them. He then wondered what kind of human would prefer to fight a demon with the strongest physique rather than one with magical power. Suddenly, a powerful beam of light shot toward them. Sylvia quickly invoked the Sanctuary of Light to counter the attack with her own. She wasn't able to fully neutralize it. The beam split her blood in its wake. Dazzle, observing the clash, marveled at the sheer intensity of the magic. He realized it was so powerful that he hadn't noticed it earlier. However, Sylvia had sensed it, and he couldn't help but wonder how she had been able to detect it. The other students watched in confusion, unsure of what was happening. Lucia called out to Sylvia, and Renata informed her that Sylvia was barely able to hold her ground. Lucia, still puzzled, wondered where the attack had come from. She hadn't sensed any malicious intent in the area and immediately ordered the guards to search for the caster. Gale, observing the scene, was surprised that the king hadn't seen the attack coming. Laverian, with a hint of understanding, explained that it must have been part of Dazel's strategy to weaken the hero and attack her at her most vulnerable. Just then, Dazel teleported near Sylvia, and Laverian remarked that Dazel was about to act, offering his full support. Sylvia, struggling to stay upright, realized that Dazel must have recognized she couldn't move or defend herself in her current state. If he'd intended to end her life, she asked him to spare everyone else, certain that he could do so. Dazel, however, hesitated. He admitted that he wasn't there to end her, but rather to observe her magic more closely. He needed to understand how it worked. To her confusion, Dazel took both of her hands in his, and she instinctively asked him to stop. Ignoring her protests, he held her hands firmly, using his power to generate a surge of lightning. Laverian, watching the scene unfold, remarked that this could be the end of the human kingdom. Lucia, however, urged him to watch carefully. Sylvia, still unsure of Dazel's intentions, asked what he was doing. Dazel replied that he was simply using the safest way to repel the attack. Through their previous body swap experience, he had begun to understand the way her magic worked. With this knowledge, he had come up with the idea of sensing their magical flows to create a single, unified magical skill. Sylvia felt that Dazel's magic was flowing through her, yet somehow it felt familiar and safe. She couldn't help but want to pour all of her power into this one skill. Together, they used their combined power to create a barrier that stopped the incoming beam of light. After the attack was neutralized, they stood victorious, a miracle in itself. Gale, still processing the events, remarked that he had thought the king was about to defeat the hero. Laverian, scoffing, asked if Gale was stupid. He reminded him that the archenemy had to be faced fairly and squarely, and that he alone truly understood the king's intentions, but he was number one. Sylvia, breathing a sigh of relief, mentioned that the plan had worked and now everyone was saved. Dazel, still holding her hand, commented that the skill was truly magnificent. Sylvia, noticing that he was still holding her hand, pulled it back, slightly flustered. Dazel explained that she didn't seem fine, so he had been helping her to stay afloat. She quickly responded, urging him not to underestimate her. It had all happened so fast, and she hadn't had time to use her buff skills to enhance her strength. Dazel, with a smirk, complimented her magic again, asking if she didn't think it was a good thing that they had exchanged bodies before. Sylvia, now fully aware of the implications, replied that he better not say that in front of anyone else.